people of Reddit who have been denied when they proposed. Why did it happen? And what was the end result? My dad proposed to my mom the night he met her. The way they explain it, they bared their souls to each other that night. They talked for hours uninterrupted. And even though my dad wasn't looking to get married, he just knew. She said no, but did say yes to another night out. He proposed again. She said no, but again, accepted another date. This went on nearly daily for 6 months. One night, my parents played Scrabble against each other for the first time. My mom loves Scrabble. She kicks people's ass up and down the block, and this is a woman who takes pride in being well read enough to serve as a quick reference thesaurus. After a hard-fought game, she lost for the first time she could remember, and my 105-pound 5'0" mother swept the board and pieces of the table, sending them flying across the room. She looked at my dad and said in a fury, "Fine, I'll marry you." My dad responded, in classic male fashion, I need to think about it." He thought about it, and barely 8 months after they met, my parents married in a tiny chapel in Vegas. They celebrated 23 years this year. Not denied during a proposal, but 99% sure she realized I was going to propose, and bailed before I had the chance. 8 years and changed together. Everything seemed totally fine. We talked about a future together plenty of times. Engagement rings, jobs, housing, kids, etc. The job and housing parts were going forward, and she had shown me rings and talked weddings plenty, so it felt like it was time to finally do that. Bought a ring, tried planning some neat trips to take her on for an awesome proposal. They kept not happening. Finally decided I was just going to do it around New Year's, but right before that she bailed. Timing was just so perfect for her not to have figured it out. Never really got an explanation, just the general, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you." One of those kinda generic statements that you hate to get, especially after so long, but at the same time I'm sure there was plenty of legitimacy to it. We met when we were young, and we grew into different people. People change a lot between the mid-teens and mid-20s. We tried to maintain a friendship for a while after that, but it was super hard for me, because I was still totally into her. I had to basically drop off the map entirely for a year or so, because we shared the same social circle and I just got so incredibly uncomfortable around her. No hard feelings I guess at the end of the day. It sucked, but it wasn't like something awful happened between us. Eventually we just stopped talking. She drifted to a new social group. I got back in mine. Life goes on. Definitely not where I expected to be at this point in my life though. Not anywhere near as exciting/interesting as some other stories. My dad proposed to my mom after they'd been seeing each other for just under 2 weeks. She laughed and basically told him he was crazy, that it was way too soon. My dad said, and he is very proud of this fact, "Fine. I asked you once. I'm not gonna ask again." My mom thought he was bluffing. After a year of dating she started giving him a hard time about not asking her to get married again, and he stuck to his guns and said she missed her chance and he wasn't going to ask again. My mom finally broke down and asked him to marry her. Made sure she properly took the piss out of him when she did it too. Made a big show about asking his father for permission. Got down on one knee in public. Got him the gaudiest engagement ring she could find. He said yes, and they just celebrated their 30th anniversary. Edit. I guess I could have done a better job of conveying the spirit of my dad's initial proposal, because some people seem to think it was a serious thing, where he actually got down on one knee, but it wasn't anything like that. My mom and dad were planning their next date, trying to figure out if they could go do anything after he got off of work, and he said, "Hey, I know, we could go get married." He was serious, but he framed it as a joke, because he knew it was insane. She thought he was joking, but kind of suspected he wasn't. Asked him if he was crazy in the very loud, hard to be offended by it way she has. Said it's too soon, but, you know, feel free to ask again later. My dad kept up his joking tone when he said he wouldn't ask again, hence why my mom thought he was just kidding when he wouldn't ask again. It wasn't at all framed like an ultimatum, but he really enjoyed reminding my mom of the fact that he'd already asked her to marry him whenever she nagged him about when he was going to get around to proposing. I was with a girl for just over 5 years. When we met, she was in a bad place. The guy she was with before me used to beat her up and stuff. Really abusive. So it was tough in the beginning, because she had major trust issues, self-esteem issues, depression, and she self-harmed. But I went and fell in love with her. Helped her get over a lot of the mental anguish she was going through. Took her to, and paid for, her therapist every other week. We lived together for 4 of those years. On our 5th anniversary, I proposed. I was madly in love with her, and I assumed she was with me. She said yes. Then, a few months after that, I got off work a bit early, picked up her favorite fish and chips for dinner and headed home. Long story short, I walked in her faking some other dude in our bed. Both as naked, she's riding the guy like a faking cowboy. They didn't even faking, hear me come into the apartment. I'll skip the details, but within 2 days of that happening, she was gone. All her stuff out of the apartment. Half of my stuff gone from the apartment, including my cash stash that was several thousand. She took my TV, a bunch of my kitchen stuff. She kept the ring. She took my faking dog man. Took the damn dog. And I haven't seen or spoken to her since. That was just about 3 years ago now. I'm proposing today. I will hopefully not report back. Edit. I'm not dead yet. I want to go for a walk. Seriously though, I'm proposing tonight around 8 PM court. I likely won't update this until tomorrow with the results, but I will keep you all updated. Thanks everyone for the best wishes and encouragement. Edit 2. I'm only here for a minute. She said yes. We'll post pictures later. Edit 2.5. Pictures, as promised. Sorry for the potato quality. http imgur.com//jfkms. I will likely post one final update tonight with the story, for those of you still interested. Thank you all so much for your support. It really helped my nerves yesterday, to know I had so much support from so many internet friends. Final update. First, thank you guys so much for all of the encouragement and best wishes. It really meant a ton to me, and to my fiancée. I'm totally just using that because I can, as well when I showed her. So, my birthday is in a few weeks, and I decided to use that as the cover for the proposal. Fiancée saw through that until halfway through the night, but I'm getting ahead of myself, and an excuse to get all dressed up. My brother and his wife took us out to dinner at one of the classier places in town at 6:30. The fiancé and I met them at their house early, so we could all ride together, for the sake of simplifying the return. The stated plan was to go to dinner, then go back to my family's house, to watch a movie by a bonfire in their little grove, where we would be joined by my other brother and his wife. What was really happening was that we were using the sheet to conceal a small group of our friends who were there to, hopefully, celebrate with us. When she said yes, the brother who was supposed to be joining us at the house for the movie was actually there to receive the guests and hide their vehicles, as well as to show them where to hide, etc. He had the fire already made. My fiancée sat down by it immediately. I stood next to her, mentally prepping for the moment. My brother nodded to me, asking if I was ready. I gave him the confirmation, and he dropped the sheet. I wish I had a picture of the exact moment, because the look on her face was perfect. I think it will always be engraved in my memory. At first, she didn't know what was happening, and thought the sheet had been knocked down by accident. Then she realized there were people behind the sheet. After another moment, she realized they weren't my family, but our friends. I remember saying something like, "This isn't actually my birthday party," and then dropping to one knee. Here's a photo from during my speech, which I barely remember making. She started crying, then said yes. Then I tried to put the ring on her finger. I'm going to pause here, because there was a beautiful surprise from my brother at this moment. First, some context is necessary. I lost my mom to breast cancer when I was 15. My brother asked for her engagement ring as a token to remember her by, and planned to hand it down to one of his children someday. Instead, he secretly had it repaired and resized for my fiancée's finger and swapped it with the ring I'd purchased. Because I don't make a ton of money, I'd chosen to get a very simple band to propose with. I didn't really like the idea because I wanted her to be able to show off her engagement ring. Anyway, back to the story. When I tried to offer her the ring, she said, "I don't care. Just hug me." Through tears, I stood up, but had already started to take the ring out of the box. I realized at this moment that the ring in my hand had something on it. I had a brief moment of panic because I thought I had accidentally left the price tag on the ring I got. Then I realized that I was holding on to the very edge of something solid and that there was a stone on this ring. I gave my brothers a super perplexed look, trying to process what had happened. I embraced the girl, and then kissed the girl, and then embraced her again for what was probably an awkwardly long time for everyone watching on. The rest of the evening was spent celebrating and talking with our friends by the fire. While we were talking, she mentioned to me that she had kind of expected me to propose that night, but thought I would do it at dinner. When I failed to do so, she second-guessed herself and thought it must have actually been just a birthday part for me. I'm so glad I managed to surprise her in the end. It was wonderful and emotional. I'm so excited to be engaged, and I can't wait to marry this woman. TLDR, we had dinner with my brother and his wife, then went back to their house with the stated goal of watching a movie on a projector by a bonfire. But really, the projector screen was hiding a group of our friends who were waiting to celebrate with us. It was awesome. I proposed after dating my girlfriend for 2 years. I was about to graduate college and move away, and she was a year behind me. I had the ring, everything perfectly planned. We discussed our future together. When I proposed, she initially said yes. About half an hour later, she seemed off. I asked her if anything was wrong, and she said she needed to think. We talked for a while, and then she said changed her answer. She said we were too young, she wanted to be on her own for a while, to be independent, etc. Jokes on her though, because now we are married. Edit. Okay, didn't expect this much attention. To explain, yes, we are married to each other, and she does know. We stayed together afterward, and another year later I proposed again, that time with a longer lasting success. I just thought, if Turk from Scrubs, an incredibly immature selfish guy can endure being rejected multiple times by the woman he loves, then I think I can at least maintain the same level of persistence in reality. Edit 2. For some added embarrassment, I proposed on day 2 of a 5-day trip we were on together. That, in retrospect, was poor planning. Trip was fun though. After a Christmas vacation we were home, and I asked her about marriage. I don't want to marry you. I never wanted to marry you. I never will marry you. Followed by a 30-minute speech about missing her single life. I died a little inside, honestly. Tried to make it work, but I realize now I stopped trying after that. 8 months later she moves out. 3 months after that she is begging me to take her back. She wants to get married. She wants to own a house. And I'm just too hurt to believe her. Therapy is helping. But a 5-year relationship died that day, and I miss it, but I'm not sure I miss her anymore. Her addiction and alcoholism played a major role in her choice and feelings. She had, apparently, been using for a few months, and kept it hidden. If you need help quitting heroin, go find it. It fucks up more than just your life. The people you hurt the worst are the ones you love the most. And that love for you may never end, but how much they care for you just may. Not my story, but the best one I've ever heard. My friend's parents met at a bar down the shore. Her dad was crazy about her mom, but it was unrequited. She slept with him anyway, just a one-night stand, and ignored him after that. Until she found out she was pregnant. He was over the moon, and she was intent on having the baby. He tried to be with her, but she consistently refused him. Proposed to her several times, ending in eye rolls, and exasperated no's from her each time. After 9 months, she went into labor and let him come with her into the delivery room. Just her and this guy who had been begging her to marry him. A few hours into labor, the doctors started to notice something was wrong. The baby's heartbeat was slowing rapidly. The mother started to panic, but the father stayed calm. He stayed with her and communicated information from the doctors. But there was little anyone could do. She delivered a stillborn. After everything happened, my friend's mom realized she had found her soulmate. They finally got together and are still married to this day. I'm the denier. I'd been dating this girl for 6 months, and it was going pretty well. We hardly ever fought, but when we did it was hard for us to get back to normal. At a good point, she said I feel like I should pop the question. I have absolutely no poker face, and she instantly saw that I wasn't on board. As a child of the 80s, all of my friends had parents who'd divorced, and I'd made an oath to myself that I was just going to be married once. I liked this girl a lot, but I wasn't convinced yet that what we had was going to last forever. So, we stayed together, went to couples counseling, and learned how to fight. It sounds strange, but I can't tell you how effective it was. We learned that my conflict pattern is to constantly work on a problem until it's solved, where her pattern is to blow off steam over time. The result was that I would keep conversations going when we fought, and would basically chase her around keeping her mad, and blocking her attempts at breaking off to cool down. I learned to just let her be mad, and check back in later, and she learned to say I just need to be by myself for a bit. It worked. Our good relationship with rough fights turned into great relationship with mature low drama fights. Conflicts that used to hang a dark cloud over the house for days were now resolved in hours. At that point I felt comfortable enough to say yes to a year-long engagement. And we've now been married 18 years, have supported each other through thick and thin, and are raising 2 awesome kids. The only regret I have is that we ended up without a proposal story, as it was effectively negotiated over time. I did get on my knee and present a ring at a fancy dinner, but even then it was a ring we'd picked out together, as she was a jewelry smith. Edit. Awkward grammar. Mine was more of a sheet or get off the pot deal. We had been together on and off for 5 years. She kept coming back and telling me she couldn't live without me, then get sick of my shit and drop me for a few months at a time. And make no mistake, I was a no esteem whiner back then. She knew I'm the marrying type, but she could not commit. Finally, after I had moved into my own apartment away from roommates, she asked to move in. I basically countered with a marriage proposal, knowing in the back of my head she would likely say no. That's what happened, and we never got back together. 18 months later, I met the woman of my dreams and now we have been happily married for over 15 years. Worked out just fine. Thanks. Edit. Clarity. PS. Holy crap on a stick. This blew up in a big way. I'll try and answer your responses. Close bracket. Oh god. I have a story. My good friend was dating this guy for nearly 2 years. I could tell things were getting a bit stale with them. One day when we went out to get lunch she told me that she was going to break it off with the guy. She seemed far more stressed about hurting the guy. He was an alright person in my book, but anywho she is telling me how she is going to do it, and was asking for advice. Right in the middle of me giving her some input, the guy comes in and looks a bit frantic. She must have told him that she was going there to meet me. He musters up the courage and walks right to our table, completely ignoring me, gets on one knee and pulls out the ring. The dude was shaking so much, and I was in awe of the worst timing ever, that my mouth was open in shock. People around that I was excited, so everyone gathers around the table starts cheering. The guy asks my friend and my friend just got up and walked out to her car and drove off. I almost died from secondhand embarrassment. All I remember is gasps and snickering from the people near me, and he just sat in her place looking crushed. I didn't know what to say. I feel kinda bad, so I just got the check as soon as possible and gave him a pat on the back. He is doing better, the last I heard. This has been about a year now. My friend is still recovering from the whole ordeal lol. When I popped the question, she declared it an amazing proposal and then began immediately planning a huge wedding for us. I was a bit terrified as she began reeling off all the names of potential bridesmaids. I guess I'll have to narrow it down to 6. Who you picking so it's balanced? I bluffed, then began going to meetup.com groups and posting strictly platonic ads on Craigslist so I could make guy friends to fill out the wedding party. I found a guy on Craigslist, but unfortunately he introduced me to the joys of drinking. I always thought beer tasted like piss, but I discovered I have a cast iron stomach that can handle the hard liquor straight up. Being perpetually drunk made the socializing easier. Saddest part came when my new BFF and I were sitting on the sofa on a Sunday morning watching the Seahawks play at the Packers. We did shots every time Madden called Favre a gunslinger. When my fiance got home from a round of burpees at the gym, She dropped her engagement ring in my glass and said, "You need this rock more than I do." TL Dr. Fiance called off the engagement after I devolved into a fat drunk. We had been dating for 6.5 years at this time. We went on a vacation to Hawaii for her 21st birthday because we wanted to make it something to remember. I planned to propose to her on the beach somewhere. I ended up choosing Waimea Bay Beach on the north shore of Oahu. She was coming back from the waves, and I popped the question. She was ecstatic and said yes. We had a very romantic couple of days after that before we flew home. Fast forward to 5 months later. We are out bar hopping with her sister and her husband, who had just got out of the military. The husband and sister are moving to a base in Germany and they are staying for a couple weeks in our town. Her sister and her were together talking for most of the night, and the husband insisted we hang out and play pool together and shoot the sheet. That's fine, he's a cool guy and she hasn't seen her sister in months. We get home from the bars around 12:30 am and all hell breaks loose. She starts screaming at me about how I'm a piece of shit and that I don't do enough chores around the house and that she had to repair a piece on my car that we both use and that I should have done that, and otherwise petty problems. It escalated to her shoving me as hard as she could into the bathroom, where I fell into the tub and hit my head. Eventually she went upstairs and I cried in disbelief for most of the night. Finally fell asleep at around 5:30 am. She wakes me up at 8 or so cause she wants to talk about it, and I tell her to wait cause she made me cry and freak out all night. I wake up at 10 am and she says to me that she doesn't want to spend the rest of her life with me anymore and that she wants to know what it's like to be single. She thinks my hobbies, snowboarding and climbing, are too dangerous. Bunch of other reasons that aren't real reasons. She had all of her stuff moved out with the help of her sister and husband by the end of that day. When I returned home after work, she had left the ring, a framed picture of us I gave her as a gift, and the bottle of wine that was bottled on the same day we got together that we were saving for our wedding night. That was exactly 1 month ago. I've tried to contact her since and have gotten no response or explanation for her crazy behavior. Don't even know where she is staying as we had mostly only mutual friends and she's not with any of them. Her sister and husband are in Germany now. She took one of our dogs as well. Edit. Never thought I'd be the jerk to have to say RIP in barks and all that, but you guys are the best support group ever. I will try my best to read what everyone has to say because you guys are killing it on the support level. You guys are making me great again. Edit 2. My father was the minister that married her sister and husband. I'm about a month older than her sister. They married at 20 and 21, I think. 8 years ago. It's been 8 years. We had known each other for 5 years, dated for 3.5. Every single day I saw her was the best day of my life. We met while working at a pizza chain and had gotten close at work. I eventually worked up the courage to ask her out, even though it was awfully frowned upon as she was a driver and I was a manager. She said yes, and we went to a party together and literally didn't talk to a single other soul that night. I was hooked. We dated for a year and then moved in together. I can still see her face perfectly, even that long ago. Her family was wonderful. Her father an esteemed professor at a nearby college and her mother was a cancer survivor with a heart of gold. Everything just seemed to fit, and I knew that I wanted to be with her forever. After dating for 3 years, I finally popped the question. I had set up a normal night in, ordered a pizza, and had a nice little night in. We had a cat, Triumph, a nice little apartment, the whole shebang. I had tied a little pillow with the ring onto tree and sat her in the other room while my lady was in the bathroom. When she got back, I called for the cat and she came in, pillow and all on her back. I proposed and she burst into tears, saying she was sorry, and ran out of the apartment. I tried desperately to reach her, through family, friends, any way imaginable. I finally heard back from her sister after 3 days. Her entire family knew, and I was the only person out of the loop. She was diagnosed with a very aggressive terminal brain cancer, just 3 days prior to me proposing. I was gutted. For so many reasons, but I could understand why she didn't tell me. After I had proposed, she told her sister that she had decided not to put me through that, but I didn't care. I would have stayed with her to the end of the earth. I tried night and day to contact her to no avail. She died just 5 weeks after I had proposed. I have never felt more lost and alone than I did at her funeral. Her family were very comforting, but I began to hate myself, thinking that it was something that I had done to scare her away, making her believe that I would leave her if she told me, when it couldn't have been further from the truth. I went into a deep depression for a very long time afterwards. I drank and did drugs, day and night. Went from job to job, not showing up for days on end. I dropped out of school, lost a lot of my friends, considered ending my life a few times. I know now that she kept it from me to try and save me the grief of losing her. But there's nothing in the world I wouldn't give to go back in time, just to hear her say yes. Edit. All these kind words and all of you sharing your stories are really warming my heart. Thank you, Reddit. The world is truly full of beautiful people. Happened a couple years ago. Me and my so had been seeing each other for about 8 months. Though we loved one another, and I felt we had a strong relationship, we hadn't yet gotten around to talking about marriage much. What led to me proposing was a mini meltdown over a slew of family and acquaintances seemingly all getting married or engaged at the same time. This led me to a sudden realization. I was approaching 30 and nearly everyone in my life around my age were already married. I know that's not a good reason to get hitched. But when you get to be that age, things change. You start thinking long term. You start looking in the mirror at yourself a little more closely. You realize you aren't going to be around forever. So one night, after much wine and such, I proposed. Didn't really plan it out that much. We were listening to the Dirty Dancing soundtrack on repeat, as was custom. She's Like the Wind came on, and I got to thinking about Patrick Swayze, and how he died, and Jennifer Grey, and how her career died. It just got me really sentimental. I sort of blurted out, hey, let's get friggin' married. Not romantic, I know, especially considering that we were pretty much laying in a puddle of lube and our own fluids at the time. In fact, I hadn't even removed the belt from around my neck yet. Well, my so was pretty stunned at first, but then leveled with me. Said they didn't really picture us together in the long term. Wanted to keep it casual apparently. I said I'd put my blood, sweat, and tears into our relationship. Literally. The futon upon which we laid was covered in them. My pleas made no difference. Our respective levels of emotional involvement were simply vastly different. It was a huge blow for me. Not as big as what came next, however. My so said it might be a good time to take a break for a while, just to reevaluate things. I agreed but held out hope that we still had a future together. When they didn't see me or even text for a month afterward, I knew it was over. So what was the end result? Well, I took a few days off from my job at a food store and life in general to spend some time working through the grief and quietly reflecting on things. And by that I mean I drank copious amounts of boxed wine, watched hour and after hours of Hallmark movies, ate nothing but flamin' hot Cheetos with my right hand, and diddled myself with the left, all while softly weeping into a pair of dirty underwear, which was the only item of clothing my soul left behind. By the 6th such day, I began to feel a painful, cramping sensation in my upper abdomen. Turned out to be a precursor of diarrhea. Not just any diarrhea, though. It was of an orange-red hue. Since my loose stools are traditionally a light shade of mocha, I knew it was time to visit a physician. During my exam, I filled the doctor in on all my recent activities, making sure to leave out not one bit of information, even the stained undies. He considered what I told him for a minute, then told me the first thing I had to do was dry out. I explained to him that masturbating 9 times a day was a crucial part of my grieving process and I wasn't about to give it up. Plus it was difficult to stay dry when Jason London is filling the screen of my television with his dashing yet underachieving good looks. And who was this so-called doctor to tell me what I can and cannot do with my incognito burrito anyway? After all, there are dozens more of his ilk on Craigslist that are perfectly willing to examine me without a patronizing demeanor. It turned out, however, he actually meant that I should stop drinking for a few weeks. I told him I would definitely not drink any more alcohol whatsoever before 11 in the morning, unless it was a holiday, like Thanksgiving or 4th of July or Black History Month or the Year of the Rat. He gave me a funny look, like he was rethinking some of the choices he'd made in life, then continued with his diagnosis. It turned out that the discomfort I had suffered was brought on by the Cheetos. Apparently, consuming Flamin' Hot in excess can give one acute gastritis. I told him there was nothing cute about the watery Dugan I dropped in his office's restroom before my exam had begun, so maybe he wanted to change his diagnosis. He told me I should revisit my strategy for taking number 2s, particularly any aspects involving the keeping of feces off the walls, and also that I should look into eating something that wasn't made out of cheese dust. I reluctantly took his advice, as well as a pamphlet with full color illustrations depicting stees in the human male, in the event a Hallmark movie came on in which Jason London did not appear. Took one more dumper, this time in men's room, then return home. In the days that followed, my symptoms cleared up for the most part. I felt healed enough, both emotionally and physically, to return to work, and also to the dating pool, as well. Yes, I kept eating Flamin' Hot Cheetos, but I made sure to dip them in sour cream, before taking them into my mouth, for safety. Much easier to digest that way, plus it keeps the Cheetos dust from turning my fingers, lips, and privates orange. So what have I been up to since? I downloaded a dating app called Tinder. Even though I'm new to it, I think I'm actually pretty good at this whole online dating thing, though I might simply be experiencing the Diane Kruger effect lol. I don't mean to be crass, but since I started Tinder, my fun bits have been kissed more than the Blarney Stone. Most importantly, however, I'm fine with not being married, and just being me, because no matter what my so took from me, they didn't take away my dignity. That's the greatest love of all. I had a couple of friends that had been seriously involved since college. They felt that marriage was a tool of the patriarchy, was only a piece of paper, etc. 6 years on and the relationship was still going strong. They decided they wanted a kid. She got pregnant and things were going well. One night they had a serious discussion and decided that, since there was going to be a baby, they really needed to figure out the legal implications. They decided it was best if they got married, so that there wouldn't be any question of who takes care of the kid if something happened to one of them, etc. A little while later the guy realized that he was going to get married, but it was decided more or less in a discussion after weighing the costs and benefits. Not very romantic. He decided, F it, if we are going to get married I should do this properly. So he plans and makes a fancy meal, candles, wine, with champagne at the ready, the whole 9 yards. At what he thought was the right moment, got down on his knee, presented her with a ring, and asked her to marry him. She looked aside and said, actually, I've been thinking about that a little more. She turned him down. I learned about this when he called me up to vent. He was hot. Anger was his go-to emotion. She had already agreed it should have been a great moment for the both of them, but instead he felt humiliated and foolish. I couldn't blame him. After all, she had already agreed to get married. Talk about a slam dunk marriage proposal lol. They were still way into each other and did end up getting married once the kid was born. They've now been together for over 20 years, but at the time I thought that their relationship was done. I've had 3 or 4 no's depending on how you count. First one was initially a yes. We'd had a mostly long distance romance, and I proposed after a couple years, but we still hardly knew each other. After visiting her family and spending time learning less flattering things about me, I think I became tarnished in her eyes and she broke it off. Second one, I proposed once, she said yes, and then when she called her parents the next day they refused to recognize the engagement and pushed her to cut it off. I hadn't met them. Third time, same girl as second. We were engaged for a few months, even took our invites. We were apart for 3 months before the wedding, so I could complete a work project. During that time I had a crisis of conscience and felt like I needed a little more time. I asked her to push back the wedding, saying I loved her, but I wasn't quite ready. She simply called it off. Absolutely gutted me, and I'm sure it wrecked her too. I suspect her parents had some influence, but in the end I think it was probably for the best. Fourth time, new girl, 3 years later. We'd been best friends who fell into dating. I'd gotten a new job and was leaving town and wanted to take her with me to kinda start grown up life together. So I proposed marriage. It was too early in the relationship, 5 months, and it was a bad decision. She had a missionary opportunity that she took and left town. 5th time I proposed, new girl in a new town. We'd been dating a year. She said yes, and we have 3 kids and 13 mostly great years together. TLDR, keep trying. Late edit. 4 kids now. I told my husband no the first time he asked. We were drunk and hadn't been dating long, so I thought he was joking. He will swear to you that it was not a joke and that he would have taken me to Vegas that night if I'd said yes. The second time I said no, he was on R&R from deployment and I think he asked because it felt like the right thing to do since I was waiting for him to get back so we could continue dating and not seeing anyone else while he was gone, not because he really wanted to get married. He asked again almost as soon as he got back and I said no again to take a few months and decompress and just date for a little while. We kept dating and talking about it and decided the time was right about 6 months later. I'm so glad I said no all those times. Not because he wasn't the right one, but because he was, and I didn't want us to screw it up by getting married before we were both totally sure. I had found out after we had broken up that she wanted me to ask her to marry her. I never did because I wanted to wait until I had my degree and had a real job to support both of us. I still lived with my mom, but she didn't care. She would have said yes if I asked her. Fortunately, we found out we were not good for each other a few years after and broke up. My buddy told me that apparently she confessed quite a bit to him, that she was waiting for me to pop the question. I'm glad I didn't, because we'd probably be divorced by now. But I'm an almost 30-year-old man with a college degree and good job living with his mom posting on Reddit at work, so I got that going for me. She's married now, and I think expecting a kid. I think I may be happier as a bachelor. I wasn't good at the relationship stuff. Update. Apparently people care more about my living situation than my failed relationship, which is actually kind of interesting to me. I will say, based on the page we are on, this should be, and pretty much has been, a judgment-free zone. I'm happy to answer any questions about both situations, as long as it's respectful. My ex proposed to me 3 times. The first time we had been dating 2 years, and he was afraid I'd leave him when he was at basic training. He wrote me a letter and called me a few days later on pass. I said no, because I was still in high school and he didn't get along with my father. The second time was a few years after that. We lived together, had a son, and I was pregnant with our second son. He was late coming home from work, and I was kind of pissed, because I thought he was hanging out with a friend or something without letting me know, and our son had been giving me a hard time that day, and being pregnant I was tired. He came in and cut me off as I started bitching him out, and said, I know that I get on your nerves sometimes, and you get on my nerves sometime too. Want to spend the rest of our lives annoying each other? Then got on one knee, asked the question, and hugged me, our son, and the baby bump while I cried. I said yes. Fast forward another 7 months or so, he wasn't serious about planning a wedding, and refuses to tell our parents about our engagement, so I gave the ring back, and we broke up shortly afterwards. A few months after our breakup he picks up the boys for his days with them, and says I still have some stuff at the house if I want to pick it up. I go with him, and he shows me that he turned the spare room into a library for me, and then hands me one of my Harry Potter books, and it is cut open to the chapter The Unbreakable Vow, and the ring is sitting inside with the words, will you marry me? The best proposal I could dream of. I said no. Edit for more info. I said no, because we were already broken up, and grand gestures to save a relationship that has already ended usually only work in romantic comedies. Our relationship ended for many reasons, most of which I don't want to get into because he is still the father of my children no matter what. Not wanting to plan a wedding wasn't a big deal, but not wanting to tell anyone we were engaged was, but even that was the least of our problems. As for the reaction, well, I sobbed and collapsed into a coughing/crying spell, and then when he realized the answer was no, he started crying so hard that he started throwing up. So I rubbed his back while he threw up in the toilet and continued to cry and then asked him to drive me home. So ever since I was little, when I asked how my parents got engaged, this is what I got. Yeah, your father had to ask me 3 times to marry him before I said yes. It was at this beautiful restaurant, so on and so forth. Cool. So my dad was denied twice and got accepted on the 3rd go around. I asked my brothers and they agreed this is the story. Nope. Turns out my parents suck at telling stories. My father took my mother out to a fancy restaurant and said, will you marry me? My mother, being dumb, was like, yes, at some point we plan on getting married, and kept going on with her life. Then right after, my dad was like, dude, will you marry me? And my mother said, of course we will, don't worry. And then my dad decided, oh, maybe I should get down on one knee type deal. And my mother finally understood and accepted. They only corrected us last year after they heard us tell my brothers F&K how they got engaged, and they were like, no, that's not true. I've been lied to. Edit. I'm 21 and found out earlier this year. My brothers never knew the truth either. Second edit was to fix formatting. In my story, can't say I was ever really asked. I was told. I started casually dating this girl I met at a summer job. I was 21 and she was 20. A month or so into it, she reveals she's going to school in the next state over. About a 7-hour drive. No big deal to me. I liked her a lot and we had fun. Cut to about 4 months in and we've had our ups and downs. Arguments that lead to her breaking up with me every so often. Then I drive across state lines to go make up with her. She apologizes every time and we get back together. One day she calls me on Skype and says she's ordering rings online. All I could see were red flags, but it didn't matter. I played along. She said she wanted people to know we were both taken while we weren't together. I rationalized it, saying, so like promise rings? And she was like, yeah, but they can be upgraded. Next time I visit, she's wearing a diamond ring and gives me a silver band. We walked around campus wearing them. It felt so wrong. There was no real discussion. She just ordered rings online and gave one to me. She turns to me and says, I can't wait to tell my mom we're engaged. I panic. I say we need to scale this back a bit and talk about it. She says I need to try harder. This goes on for quite some time. A month later, as things were finally getting back to normal, I get a phone call at 2 a.m. She tells me she's been raped on campus. I immediately drive down to her college. When I arrive, I tell her I'll help her report it to the campus police. At this point, her story began to change. It was her ex, not some random guy. She let him in. He didn't force his way in. I said I'd report it myself, and she psychically stopped me from doing so. I went home after that. Next day I get a big long text about how she cheated on me and just didn't know how to tell me. So she made up that story. Icing on the cake is she did again, and that's when she realized she wants to upgrade the rings and marry me. I cut off communication with her completely. She traveled abroad for the rest of the year, constantly trying to contact me. She stalked me for a bit. When she finally returned home, my sister ended up telling her off, and that's what did the trick. I took the rings to the woods and threw them in the mud. I attached a note with the story on it. Very dramatic, but it was therapeutic. Haven't told anybody I know about the rings. When I tell them this story, TLDR, I was an idiot. Crazy girlfriend ordered rings online and pronounced us engaged. She cheated and lied about it. I threw out the rings in the most dramatic way possible. A bit of a switch, but I technically denied my wife when she proposed to me. I was in college, she was in the military, and we were HS sweethearts. Started dating at 15. This story takes place when we were 19. I should also mention that she was somewhat homeless and stayed with my family after her mom passed when we were 17. Dad not in the picture. Only other family was a couple sisters that more or less disowned her after mom passed. I'm just mentioning this because I talk about my family but don't mention hers, and that's why. She had just gone through boot and core school, USN, and had gotten orders to her first duty station. She didn't want to go alone because she was nervous about it, so she asked me to drop out of college and move with her. She had about a week of leave between school and reporting down there, Sunday to the following Monday, and just about the whole week she pushed the issue. I was insanely depressed, was a bit suicidal due to poor performance in school, failing all my classes, and she knew it. Most the reason I was against it was because I knew my parents would be upset, and I, at that point, had only briefly been out of my home state a handful of times, so moving 2 states away with nothing lined up was pretty damn scary. But I had also had to be talked out of climbing the library tower and taking a nice leap, so what did I have to lose? I finally relented on Thursday night. My mom wept, my dad was fine with it, because he's the one that had to talk me out of jumping. He worked at the college, so he saw how unhappy I was there pretty often. So Friday morning was pretty hectic. First, we had to get a marriage license and find a justice of the peace willing to do this on extremely short notice, as in, that day. We get the license, and I managed to find a job with an opening that afternoon, which by insane coincidence, is the same job that married my own parents. Next my mom and sister took her out to get a dress and get her all dolled up. I got my suit ready, and we got married around 1 p.m. Next stop was the DMV to get her a new driver's license with her new name, and since my mom worked there, we got that done in record time too. My parents took us out to dinner at a local steak place, and then paid for us to stay in a hotel for the night. Saturday was just packing. Lots and lots of packing, and planning the 8 to 10 hour drive to where we would be living. Sunday was just driving, and finding a cheap hotel to stay in, while we looked for a place to rent. Monday morning she reported, got told off, because she was supposed to contact her chain of command, before getting married between duty stations, but overall they just let it drop. Her mentor at the new command got us into the same trailer park he lived in, which was actually quite nice and pretty cheap. It was also only about 3 blocks from the hospital she was stationed at, and I would occasionally walk to work after I got a job there. That was almost 15 years ago. We've moved a few times, had some major ups and downs, even separated for about a year after we had our second kid, and have 2 boys aged 4 and 6. It's been a weird ride sometimes, but we make it work. We were best friends. We spent a year together after meeting again at college. It was the best year of my life. To this day I have never felt the simple joy and enthusiasm I had during those short months. I had a crush on her for a long time before that, but after seeing her again I fell deeply in love. I refrained from telling her for a long time out of fear for our friendship, but it just got too hard to live a lie, so I made a decision. I spent hours writing a heartfelt letter by hand, then mailing it to her. I'll never forget the feeling of flipping up the little red flag by my mailbox, my nerves making the world spin and my hand shaking as I sent the paper holding my hopes and dreams on its way. She got the letter a few days later and cried upon reading it, telling me when we saw each other next that it was one of the most beautiful things she'd ever read. She said she needed some time to think, and I left it at that. Soon after she told me that, while she will love me as a friend, she just doesn't feel anything deeper for me. I shrugged and said it was fine, that we could be friends and keep things the way they were. Unfortunately, I didn't understand the level of emotional anguish that comes with being one of the closest friends to the person you love more than life itself. Months passed and we began to talk less, hang out a few less times each week. She began dating a guy and moved in with him. I went to their housewarming and tried my best to remind myself that my feelings belonged in the past. It's a constant struggle to move on, but time heals all wounds, as they say. Hopefully I can find love like that again one day. Edit, misread the prompt, and missed the proposal aspect. Whatever, I'm leaving the post up, it was cathartic anyway. Gonna get buried most likely, but why not? In 2009 I was in the Army as a bomb squad technician. We did a lot of security for the POTUS, as the Secret Service does not have a bomb squad. So we would travel to the destination days before Obama would arrive, and basically start working immediately. Obama pushed back his trip by a few days, so I was basically on vacation in Singapore for 2 nights. One night myself and a few agents went out for drinks. I met the most beautiful French girl I had ever seen. All the other guys were trying to talk her up, so I tried to act cool and seem interested but not desperate. It paid off. We ended up spending the night drinking, dancing, talking, and making out. I knew she was the girl for me. We ended up going back to my hotel together and stayed up all night making love. She had to leave at 5 a.m. for her flight to Malaysia. I held her tightly in the early morning hours and told her I didn't want her to go. I asked her to marry me and move to Hawaii with me. She started to cry, saying that she wished we had more time together and that she couldn't do it. Then she left. I got her contact info, only to lose it somehow. 10 months later I was getting ready for another business trip, and I found her card in my luggage in a slip pocket. I looked her up on Facebook and asked her to come to New York over Christmas and New Year's to spend time with me. It was a Hail Mary. I couldn't believe it, but she said yes. We spent the next 10 days doing all kinds of stuff. It was amazing. Toward the end of her stay I told her I loved her and asked her to marry me. She said yes. I was the happiest man on earth. Due to my military service, immigration issues, and her work situation, she wasn't able to permanently move to the US until May of 2014. We visited each other a lot during that time, and I even spent a year living in France with her after my retirement from the army. We also lived on Skype, often falling asleep together. Got married in June of 2014, and it's been great ever since then. Sorry for not formatting in paragraphs. She had always told me that if I ever proposed to her, she wanted her family to be there to see it somehow. So, we were on a vacation, and we were down in New Orleans, where the majority of her family lives. I already had the ring, and was planning to do it there, so her family could be present. They were all on board with it, and really liked me. So I had it all planned out. We were going to go visit the church where her grandmother got married and the house she grew up in, and it was gonna be this big thing and everyone was going to come out after. But the weather didn't cooperate. No way we are gonna walk around in the rain in nice clothes and get them all muddy. So that's out. Okay, backup plan. The next day, we were planning to go to Storyland with the kids. It's kind of a storybook themed amusement park. It's not the best option, but her family was going to be there, and I worked up this storybook romance speech. But the kids were assholes that morning, so she told them we weren't going to the park anymore. Damn it. So, I sat down with her grandmother and asked her opinion on how to do it. She suggested a simple picnic with the family on Lake Pontchartrain. That was perfect. Everyone was going to be there, and it was the exact same spot we had visited 2 years earlier. So we went to the picnic. But again, the kids were being assholes and wouldn't listen, and she was pissed off, and I couldn't seem to corral everybody together at once. So that was out. Okay, last chance to have everyone together. After the lake, we all went for a little drive through City Park. There's a little stage looking thing with nice lighting and pillars, and okay, this will work. It's my last chance because none of the family is available tomorrow. So, I walk with her up onto the stage. And it's faking trashed. Garbage everywhere. We are sweaty as hell from walking around in the heat. She's cranky. But, this is the last chance to have her family present. So I pull the ring out of my pocket and, no, not here. Not now. Are you faking serious? There's garbage over there. I'm sweaty. I'm miserable. The kids have been dicks. I want it to be memorable. So the ring goes back into my pocket, and I accept defeat. The next day, she tells me to dress nice, that we were going for dinner, to apologize for shooting me down like that. So we call an Uber, and go to a pretty nice Italian restaurant. We eat dinner, and I excuse myself to the bathroom. When I returned, she took me by the hand, and looked me in the eyes, and told me how much she loves me, and how I've been a wonderful father to her children, and how she couldn't imagine life without me. Then, she got down on one knee, and pulled out a ring. She had shot me down, because she was planning to propose the next day, in a quiet restaurant without her family squeaking and making a big deal of it. We are now engaged. The wedding is next year. I can't imagine life without her. A tale of almost, but not. Dated a woman I met in college. I fell for her the moment I saw her. But we were both dating others. It took until the end of college 3 years later to start dating. We did. I eventually moved from New York City to Albany to be with her. Life was good, so I thought. I started to plan on asking the question, as I was also preparing a surprise birthday party for her. Her family went through with the party for her. I didn't attend. I made the arrangements with a restaurant, talked to her parents, who said, "We appreciate the respect, but ultimately, it is her choice." It is just after Christmas. Visited my parents, went to the Diamond Exchange in Manhattan with them, picked out a stone, started working on a setting. Things going great, or so I thought. I found out later she was unhappy and had expected me to change. What, you ask? I never got an answer to that. In her eyes the relationship was dead around Halloween. She ended it early January. She didn't want to ruin the holidays. When she did break the news, I cried like a baby and was destroyed. She didn't like seeing me that way. I told her how. Do expect me to respond? I love you. I moved here for you. Gave up a solid civil service job for you. I made plenty of sacrifices. She didn't have an answer to that. In retrospect, it hurt bad. Very bad. I considered suicide. It was awful. We still lived in the same apartment. I moved out within 3 weeks. We worked at the same company. Thank God we worked in different areas. I rarely saw her. In the end, I feel it was a lesson. I'm now with someone whom I adore. That was nearly 20 years ago. I've had several long-term relationships since, but the woman I'm seeing now is now whom I want to be with. We aren't exactly alike, but we complement each other well. And the love is deep, honest, and there. I'm planning to ask her in a couple of months. I proposed to my ex-girlfriend earlier this year. We had a bit of a complicated history together. We'd been dating for a couple of years, but large chunks of that time we were forced to do a long distance thing, even in separate countries for a while. Because of the stress that long distance brings to the table, we went through some rough patches and called things off at one point. When I proposed, she got really emotional and said she couldn't say yes because she was too afraid that we wouldn't work out. I didn't understand it then, and I still don't understand it now. But that's what she said. I guess I feel for her on some level. It's hard being so focused on a negative outcome that you can't appreciate the positives in life. We talked for a bit longer that night after I proposed, and I ended the relationship altogether that night. It really was a crossroads do or die kind of moment. In hindsight, there were red flags all over the place. I guess hindsight is 20/20 in that case. But the bottom line is that we weren't meant to be together. I've since, very recently, started dating someone new. It's far too early to tell if my new lady and I have a future together, but the initial signs are extremely promising. My experience with my ex was an important one in shaping who I am. I don't think anyone should go through that experience. It's genuinely terrible, but at the same time I'm weirdly happy that it happened. I don't know, the whole thing makes no sense to me. I was bartending a few years back near a university. It was a popular bar to be sure, but it's just a neighborhood watering hole. I had a young couple come in and sit at a high top for a mid-afternoon meal. The bar otherwise empty in the lull between lunch and dinner. The sun streaming in through tinted windows highlighted dust suspended in the still and beer stale air. Muted football highlights on the TVs. Manager closing out the morning till in the corner. Sticky plastic menus wedged between the wall and ketchup bottles. I finish washing the last of the glasses from lunch and wipe my hands on the towel that's been hanging off my belt since morning. She's on the bored side of indifferent and wearing her mid-semester Tuesday's best, a second string ensemble of malware that says it's been a few days since she did laundry but wasn't yet forced to get creative. He slumped in his chair, vibrating with a stoner's anxiety and a style that clearly rolled out of bed and into the passenger seat of her car with him. They're kids, but she orders a gin and tonic. He shows his first sign of lucidity as he watches me check her ID, then retreats and mutters something to the table about a water and lemon. Their lunch was mostly uneventful. In the midday crawl I had time to observe their interactions to some degree. There were probably 4 of them in total. Most of the time was passed silently sipping her drink more slowly than the ice was melting. Picking at her wings with a fork, him staring at his basket of fries as the ketchup sagged to the bottom. Their eyes wandered lazily but strategically, using every inanimate excuse available in that room to avoid landing on the pair on the opposite side of the table. They did nothing and needed nothing, and their scene eventually faded to a still life swallowed in the noise of the Americana hung from the walls above them. Suddenly my eye detected movement, the way a safari cat must, revealing once again their presence. One sweat-panted knee planted on the mop-streaked floor, empty hands clasped, as if mid-prayer as he looked up, and mumbled at a girl frozen to her bar stool. Wide-eyed, she slowly wiped wing sauce away from her lips, and matched his gaze as she dragged her chin excruciatingly side to side. She pointed to his empty chair. They speak a few words inaudible to me, and again silence. Time resumes, the earth lurches into rotation, I get back to work. I'm eventually summoned by the Pavlovian tap of an empty highball on varnished wood as she steps up to the bar. My eyes must have spoken. He just proposed to me, in a wings joint, without a ring, and then asked me to pay. I wished her good luck as she slapped a bill on the bar, and left without him. He sat there for quite some time doing nothing, showing no emotion or anything to distinguish him from a wax figurine. He just stared at his soggy fries, slice of lemon still perched on the rim of his glass. Eventually he rose, and wandered to the bar. Hey man, I'll give you the rest of my dime bag, if you can give me a ride to my cousin's. Not me, but a friend of my dad's from high school. She's a lesbian, and had an awesome girlfriend, and decided to propose. It was their anniversary, so they dressed up, and went out to the fancy restaurant, where they had their first date. She talked to the restaurant, and they agreed that the waiter would bring it out with dessert. So dessert comes around, and the waiter puts a plate with a ring on it, and the words "Will you marry me?" written on it in chocolate sauce. The woman started in with a speech she'd prepared, but then her girlfriend burst into tears. She panicked, thought she'd asked too soon, starts trying to comfort her, etc. Then, the girlfriend reached into her handbag, and pulled out a black box. Apparently, she was gonna take her to the spot where they first kissed, and pop the question. My dad's friend didn't even consider it, because she was the butcher one, and assumed that meant that she'd be the one asking. They calmed down, and both said yes. They've been married for over 10 years, and had a kid. They're very happy. We fell in love over a Cupid. She lived in Poland and I in the US. We were a 99% match out of like 2,000 questions. I messaged her thinking, well, this is the highest percent person I'll see on a site like this. I might as fucking well. As I'm sure you're all curious how you get a beautiful girl that's a 99% match to respond to you on a Cupid, I said, if you. And she said she liked our chances. She came to visit me over Christmas for 3 weeks. We confirmed that everything we were feeling was accurate and awesome. She went back to Poland. We decided we couldn't live without each other. So I quit my job and managed to convince them to let me do aspects of it remotely on an hourly basis. I sold everything I owned. I packed everything in 3 suitcases. I designed a ring based on a conversation we had briefly about how she liked practical things. She's an engineer. I flew to Poland for the first time and took to Ambien on 12-hour flight because I had already pulled an all-nighter to finalize my moving. They didn't kick in until I arrived. We got into her apartment and sat on the couch. I did what I thought was a proposal. She said no as I fell asleep with her on my lap. She said yes after she got to actually see the ring and hear me speak words that made sense. We are planning on getting married at some point. For now we are just enjoying making the impossible possible. Our very first date was at a movie theater I used to work at. We had gone on a couple of just friends get-togethers there before we started dating, and she said she wouldn't ever date me. She was very honest and upfront. She refused to let me buy her anything, but since everyone there knew me, we ended up getting everything for free. Fast forward a few months and her asking me if I would be her boyfriend, and we went on our first legitimate date to the Avengers. We went with a few of our friends in the VIP room, where you can bring alcohol, control the volume, etc. We were together about 3 years when I had the same friends get together and make a video, which I had the managers play before the movie we were seeing. It was basically them all explaining our first date and whatnot. Then at the end of the video they say asterisk 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 has something he'd like to ask you, at which point they throw up the lights and I walk in and ask her to marry me. She absolutely hates being the center of attention, especially in a public setting. So she says, "No, I hate you." But then with a smile she said, "Absolutely." I was 20 and had found the one. She was amazing. I had never been able to talk with anyone as well as with her. We were in college. I had just transferred after wasting a lot of 2 years of college in booze and pot. I was there to start over and I was rocking it and met her. Only problem was she was engaged and going to graduate that year. Her fiancé was out of state, had already graduated. Lucky for me, he had turned into something of a jerk to her. We weren't really dating, keeping it in the friend zone, but we both were crushing on each other. They broke up that summer, and she moved back and got a job near me to see where it would go. I transferred again to be closer to her and lived a dream for a couple of years. Okay, I had some faults and some difficulties due to some hard things in childhood, but I was seeing a doctor about it, and I was alive and so happy. I then proposed and bought a small ring, still more than I could afford, and she said yes. I was ecstatic, but I began to fall apart. I had never been a stellar student. I lacked discipline, and my good part-time job often interfered, and I hid my failings from her. She planned a wedding, while I realized more and more how I had screwed up. I wasn't going to graduate in time, and could not tell her. I felt like a complete jerk. I was a complete jerk. Eventually she sensed something was wrong, and pressed me on it, and I came clean. And she was devastated. The engagement was off. I was devastated. We still loved each other a lot, but she was not going to heal quickly. She moved back home. I moved back to the previous college, trying to reboot again. And we stayed in touch. I was not a great long distance boyfriend either. But we stayed in touch. And I bombed that semester. I moved back home, 24 years old by now, and could not find any job at all. For months. But during that time, we stayed in touch. This was prior to cell phones and internet, just letters and expensive phone calls. And we drew closer again. I was humbled, but had learned a lot. And she had never fallen out of love with me, nor me her. She suggested I move out there to look for work. I raised several $100s doing medical tests. I was the guinea pig. Trying to wrap this up, I moved there. Found a decent job for no degree yet. We dated about a year there. I proposed again with a bigger ring. She said yes. And we got married. It hasn't been perfect, because I still had some damage to overcome. And she had some damage caused by me to overcome. We worked it out. We had 2 kids, now grown, and have been married for 27 years. And we still have a lot of that original magic. I had a major crush on a girl for years, and we dated off and on, but it never seemed to work out. I eventually moved away to another city for a while, and decided to join the army. I'll let her know about my decision and our relationship was rekindled. It was something I didn't want to let go of, but I had already finalized my entry into the service. As a Hail Mary, as another user described it, I proposed. She had the biggest smile on her face. I had never seen anything like it. She knew the timing wasn't right, so she said we would have to wait on it. I went off to basic training, and we wrote each other every day. Our connection was never stronger. However, all my tales of army life lead her to enlist in the Navy, which she informed me of about 2 weeks before graduation. Now how is that supposed to work out? We keep in contact, and are supportive of one another. After all, we still have time. Fast forward about 6 months and we are talking on the phone. She lets me know that she has something to tell me. I press the record audio button on my phone. She says in a giddy voice, "I'm getting married." My response was simply, "Oh, really?" She said that if she got married, she would be able to get out of the barracks and into base housing as well as get tax breaks and other perks. So she was going to marry a guy who was also in the same field of work, out of convenience. I got really drunk after the conversation and ended up playing back the recording for some fellow squadmates. I still remember one of them saying, "You can hear the exact moment when your heart breaks." 12 years later the two of them are still married and have kids, and are living a fulfilling life together. In classic tragic fashion, I never really moved on. I did get married to another person a few years back, but it didn't last very long. I loved the person, but was never in love with them. That feeling was always somewhere else. We had talked about it since we met up. This is where we were in our lives. This is what we wanted. We were each the person the other wanted to build a life with. We were both very supportive, and we were both coming from a sensitive spot in each of our pasts, so we appreciated each other all the more. I asked. She laughed because she thought I was joking, even after it was obvious that I wasn't. You know, ring in hand, looking directly in her eyes, the whole shebang. She complained for weeks after that, demanding to know why I wouldn't do it again, whether or not I was going to ever do it again, or if she'd just have to live with her choice. I waited for that nonsense to die down, and then waited some more, until I felt comfortable doing it, and wanted it again. We were also having a baby at the time, so she insisted I only wanted to propose for the sake of the baby, and turned me down again. Things started going downhill after that. She was very self-centered, refusing to have even the simplest of conversations about some anxiety issues I was having. I went to pick her up from an accident she got in. She complained that I didn't sound like I wanted to help her. I wanted to help plan our daughter's first birthday. She shut me out at first, then blamed me for not being interested enough after she'd already planned it. I wasn't making enough at my non-minimum wage, full-time job. I didn't fix the garbage disposal quick enough, despite not knowing how. I didn't get rid of the ants that came into the house, despite cleaning up the house and wiping them away when they appeared. I broke it off. I went on a date with somebody else, and she tripped out. Accused me of not being around for my family, even though I was there every night after work, making the dinner she insisted was my responsibility, cleaning the house she thought was disgusting, making the plans she refused to participate in. Then she said she'd break my computer. Then she said she wouldn't have any problem taking my daughter from me in court. Then she said would throw me in jail for false accusations of domestic abuse. I still wish I could have worked with her long enough to fix things, but there is a difference between a desire to help and fear for my own safety. She trapped herself in her own hell, and I'm not the person who can help her with that. As a result, I haven't seen my daughter in a month. I was unable to see her for her first Halloween or her first birthday. I just hope they're both happy. I met my wife a long time ago back in college. We were very close friends for a long time, and then one day I realized that I was totally into her. But did nothing about it, because I didn't want to ruin our friendship. I never said anything to anyone about this, except my mother. A short time after that, my roommate and best friend admitted that he was into her. So I figured that she was off the table at that point and gave up, but I still had strong feelings for her. Eventually, she confessed to me that she was into me. This was right after I had hooked up with her roommate who was also her best friend. We ended up getting together and this caused a lot of temporary drama. It was a very passionate beginning to a relationship. One day, after only a few months of dating, we were sitting out on the quad under a beautiful blue sky. She was laying with her head on my stomach and we were both just laying there, staring up and talking. It must have been at least a couple of hours, right there in the middle of a lot of people, but I felt as if it were just her and I. At that moment I realized that she was the one I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. Without really thinking about it, I kind of interrupted the conversation and said, "Will you marry me?" She sat up, looked at me sort of cross-eyed, and said, "Are you serious?" And I said yes. She said it's far too soon for that. I wasn't really upset, because she was right, but I knew I was right too. That was in 1998. We moved in together in 2003, and it wasn't until 2010 that we ended up getting engaged and married in 2011. She asked why did it take so long for you to propose? And I explained that I had already been rejected once and had thought we were both comfortable with the state of our relationship. She totally didn't even remember that day. After spending 4 or so years together and both having graduated college and working, decided we should travel the world a bit. Of course, we had had the usual talks about getting married, kids, and a family together. We even, at this point in our lives, shared cars and had a house and dog together. An opportunity arose to work in Japan for a year and we jumped at it. Due to issues with leaving her job I took off 4 months in advance of her. Those 4 months were a blast in Japan. It's hard to even put into words. I really dug in learning the language and culture. However, during that whole time apart one still managed to keep almost daily contact with my girlfriend. When the day came for her to arrive I trained it up to Tokyo to receive her. I was so stoked to finally get to see her again, albeit nervous because I had changed so much physically since I had last seen her. I had gone from a hefty 215 pounds to something around 180. She had come with her sister and return ticket home. We enjoyed that week she was here, and in my bliss I was completely oblivious to the idea that she would be flying home with her sister, and that it wasn't just a convenient way to book their flight. Certain factors surrounding the job made me believe this. After a fun-filled week of travel ended she announced she wouldn't be staying in Japan, and that she'd like to split up. My knee-jerk reaction was a propose. I got down on one knee and proposed, ringless and fighting back a flood of emotion. She was the girl I had wanted to live the rest of my life with, no doubt about it. Yet, here she was marooning me in Japan. Needless to say how it all turned out. The rest of the story can write itself. I will say however, that in 2 years of self-pity and hanging around Japan I really learned to like the place as a home. 6 years passed and now I'm happily married to my beautiful Japanese wife. Finally my time to shine. We were madly in love with each other after the first few months. Then in some psycho crazy twist, my brain decided to fuck a little bit with me. Suddenly, doubts were everywhere. I was scared, did not want to engage her. We talk, she says it's fine, let's take our time, etc. Doubts don't go away. Do I love her? Do I love her enough? Can't let her go, etc. With the doubts, come the disputes. At one point she even punched me. So, we are 1.5 years in the relationship, and I try my best to do better. We go in holidays, I do everything she wants. At some point, in a dispute, I just shout, do you love me? She answers yes. So I ask her, then will you marry me? She doesn't answer, takes me in her arms. 2 months later, she had ditched me. 2 months later, she was all over Facebook with her new hot boyfriend. She told me my proposal made her think, and this is how I lost her. That was 2 years ago, still wasn't able to enter a relationship ever since. Please internet, send me your virtual hugs. Met the dream girl of my life. She was perfect in my eyes and already had a promising career. I had my sheet together working, bringing in a steady income. We went out on a couple of dates at first, and after the third date I moved into her apartment. At first it was great, we got along just fine. Then I started being selfish in the relationship and let things get bad. She went on antidepressants and tried to cope. She threatened to end the relationship and I promised to change. I would make progress, but then I would go back to old habits and didn't take very good care of myself. We both worked a lot and we weren't spending quality time together like we used to. It felt like we were becoming more like roommates. I wanted to save what we had because I felt like, even though we were going through so many problems, I didn't want to risk losing her. So I bought a ring and proposed in front of my family. She sounded like she wanted to get hitched and do things properly. She did say yes, but I'm pretty sure it was only because I put her on the spot. Months go by, nothing much has changed. I'm still the same asshole she has been dealing with for months. We start getting into more fights and tells me I need to grow up. She ends up pen paling with some guy while we are still together. We get into one big fight one night and I sleep on the couch. The next morning she heads off to work and leaves me a text message saying I can't take it anymore. I don't care, move your sheet out tonight. Just like that I go to work feeling miserable. I move back in with my parents and sleep on the couch just trying to figure out where everything went wrong. I was so blind and stupid that I didn't see the writing on the wall. I had been taking advantage of her this whole time. The engagement ends. She keeps the ring and other things. I'm just thinking, at this point, that my life is over. Fast forward today. We are still friends. She ends up with her pen pal, and he treats her better than I ever could. I've been single ever since, and have a hard time with commitment. It gave me the opportunity to rebuild and restructure my life. I had a lot of growing up to do still, and I had been passing the buck for so long that it was probably better for me in the long run. I've become more responsible with money, more independent and less needy of other people. On the other hand, I can't find another girl like her, and I get the feeling I never will. I'm happy for her though. We still talk occasionally, but it's usually at random spurts. She is recently engaged to the other guy and I wish them both the best of luck. The story I have goes back over a long period of time. It's still really unclear to me, and in some ways it still goes on. It's been a hard thing to deal with, and I'm hoping that maybe writing about it will help me move forward. This is going to be lengthy, but I'll try to TLDR it at the end. When I was a senior in high school, I met a girl who was an incoming freshman. She was older for her class, and I was younger for mine, so there was only like a 2 to 3 year age difference between us. We never dated at time, but we had a lot of mutual friends and hung out with the same group. We stayed in contact while I was in college and still hung out every now and again. As the other friends went their own ways, we still stayed in contact. We were pretty close friends and just enjoyed each other's company. Starting my junior year in college, she started dating some guy that was a total asshat. He would leave her at parties, scream at her all the time and cheat on her. She was fed up with him one day and came over to hang out because I had always been supportive of her in the past. We were talking and she ended up kissing me. I was really confused and didn't know what to do. I didn't want to be the other guy. She was a close friend. She was still in high school, etc. There was a whole wave of emotions that occurred at the time I just wasn't ready for, but I knew I cared about her and didn't want to ruin our friendship. Part of me wanted something more with her, but there were too many variables involved at the time. I was honest. I said I really cared about her, but I didn't want to be the other guy and that it just wouldn't be a good idea. It just kinda ended there. We didn't really have contact with each other for like 2 to 3 years. We were still Facebook friends, but neither of us never really posted anything. This is important later. Time went by, and I started dating another girl. We were together for 2 years, but the relationship began to get stale. I was going to move away for grad school and I didn't really see a future. I'm looking on Facebook, and I see a status of hers that sounds like she is kinda on the down and out. So I message her, and we start chatting. It's like we picked up where we left off. It was crazy. We went out for coffee. She's only 20 at this point, and I'm 22, so we didn't go out for drinks. This again is important later, and had a great time. She was having an awesome college career, and was in student leadership. She had ditched the asshole, but was just stressed with all of the things she had going on, thus the lamenting Facebook status. As the night came to a close, we were sitting in the car after, and we start kissing. We missed each other a lot and kinda started up a little summer fling. We hung out like every other day and just had a damn good time. The thing was, it never gravitated around being sexual, and I was okay with this. I simply enjoyed just being with her again. As the summer progressed, our relationship began to grow. We talked about how we knew each other for like 7 years at this point, and how crazy it was that we could pick up and have such a great time. She was always extremely flirty and upbeat, and we got to the point where we began talking about sex. She got extremely serious and said she didn't want to. I asked why, and she said the asshole she was dating gave her HPV because he had been cheating on her. She was extremely sensitive about the issue and said none of the shots or remedies had been able to help her. She didn't want to have sex or do anything sexual because she didn't want me to get it. I understood and we didn't do anything. Like I said, I was generally okay with this because I cared about her so much. In any event, the summer came to a close, and as such I moved away, and it was difficult. I tried to keep in touch, but she wouldn't write back. She had her 21st birthday party and never let me know, so we could celebrate or anything like that. Another year went by without hearing from her, so I moved on, started dating other people. I saw on Facebook she started dating another guy, but it was cool, because I was dating other people too. Nothing really serious. Well, around Thanksgiving of 2011 I called her and she answered. We conversed for like an hour. It was great to hear from her again. I asked her to a Thanksgiving event with my friends and she agreed to come. I drove back home for the holidays and met up with her, and once again it was like old times. We were hanging out at the party, having a beer on the front porch, remembering the good old days, etc. It was midway through the party and we were by no means drunk, but had a couple to the point where everyone was more social. I offhanded mentioned gosh we've been friends for 8 years. It was crazy we weren't married yet, to which she replied well let's do it. I was kinda stunned. I said really? You're screwing with me? And she says nope. Let's do it next summer. Needless to say I was on cloud 9. The rest of the evening we were ecstatic. We didn't tell anyone but we were just excited. After dropping her off that evening I called her the next day and asked if she was for real, and she said yes. We spent the rest of the break together and tried figuring out how to make it work, even though I lived 5 hours away from her. But here's where the weird things started to happen. After returning back to school, I tried to get in touch, but she never made attempts to contact me again. She wouldn't even set her Facebook status to in a relationship, a petty thing I know, but that was a big deal at the time. I would always call, but she would never call me. I would make arrangements for her to come down, and she would never show, because she had to work. It was always this one-sided involvement, where there was never any efforts from her to reciprocate. Then without warning I see she is dating another person. I have no idea what's going on, and so I just do my thing and let it go. I started dating again, and have been in my current relationship for 4 years. Since then she's called and we've chatted, but have remained pretty much distant. I would love to sit down and actually talk about what the hell happened, but at the same time I just want to move forward. I think about it a lot. I don't know if it was her, or me, or us, or the timing, or what have you. It's always been an unanswered chapter of my life that rears its head when she attempts to make contact. It's like every time I think I'm where I need to be, she calls and it shakes my world up. I'm really tired of having this time of the year ruined, because it brings up all the feelings I had when we were talking about getting married. I still think about her a lot, and I don't know what to do. I want to move forward in my current relationship, but always think about what if. I'm really happy with the person I'm currently dating. I trust her, she's reliable and we care about each other very deeply. I just always think about what it would have been like with her, and it's just been something I have to live with. As I write this, I feel a little better. So thanks for spending some time for those who have read it. TLDR. A lifelong friend said she wanted to marry me but she would never actually pursue a relationship. Started seeing this girl my senior year of high school. She was cool, and we really never had to work on our relationship. We kind of just fit. Well, after I graduated I joined the military, and we weren't together long enough for me to commit to a marriage, so I decided to try and take the long distance relationship approach, and she was totally cool with it. We were doing great, and she would come visit me about 4 to 5 times a year while I was in the military. As the years went on I felt it was right about time for us to take the next step in our relationship. We had this thing where she always wanted to be called princess, so of course I had to be all romantic and stuff, and buy her a princess cut ring. It was stupid expensive, and it was obvious to everyone but me that I was blind in love. Well, she comes to visit me for a few weeks, and about halfway through I proposed to her fully confident that she would say yes. Well, she says no, FML right, so I ask her okay why, and her response was I feel like you are proposing for the wrong reasons. So we walked around in silence for a bit, and then we sat down and talked about it a little more. This woman has the audacity to ask me if she can wear the ring, even though she said no to me. Tries telling me please unmask psychopath, just until we get home. It is so beautiful. I reply with obvious hell no, and the week we had left was the most awkward week of my life. Come to find out she was cheating on me for the past few months, and it wasn't the first time. Just the first one that I had found out about. Needless to say it was a miracle she said no. I was the one that said no. We were together for 3 years, and when things started taking a turn for the worse he decided to propose. When I say things started taking a turn for the worse, I mean he pushed me into my fish tank, shattered it. I had cuts all up and down my back. He choked me, so my grandma in the next room wouldn't hear me crying for help. I ended up uppercutting him and shattering his molars just to get him off of me. This was over a hoodie. There's more that's worse, but it's still hard for me to talk about. The only person that knows is my boyfriend, and that's because he has to deal with my PTSD nightmares. I stayed with him for 8 months after that because, well, I guess I don't really know why. It's probably because he knew so much about some bad things that had happened in my past, and he threatened to tell my parents who didn't need to know. Looking back, I should have left after the first year, before he cut me off from my friends. He ended up cheating on me, and now I'm in a great relationship with one of his old coworkers, and he's engaged to a girl he was with for 2 weeks beforehand, because he wanted to spite me. All in all, I'm glad I said no. Sorry, this is kind of all over the place. It's weird to talk about. Here's a story for ya. It happened to an older gentleman I once met in Canada. It started in the late 70s, when he was in his first year of college. One day he was sitting alone in his dorm room, studying, when all of a sudden the door flew open and his Japanese friend pushed a Japanese girl that he hadn't seen before into his room. She for you. He cried as he dashed out the room, leaving the two students staring at each other, confused as all hell. They became friends, strictly platonic, and through her broken English and his even more broken Japanese, they formed a bond. After the semester was over, he dropped her off at the airport and casually said that if she was ever in town again to look him up. Oh, and one more thing he casually and jokingly threw in, who knows? Maybe we could even get married. She flew back to Japan, and our protagonist continued living his normal college life for about another year, when one random Wednesday afternoon, he was sitting alone in his dorm room again, studying, and she burst in through the door. Our protagonist nearly screamed. "You said you would marry me, so here I am," she proudly announced. Our protagonist looked like he had seen a ghost. What was this girl thinking? He had meant that as a joke. Was she serious? She must be, because why else would she travel 4,700 miles to see him out of the blue? Well, shit. He was gonna have to do this. He was going to have to keep his end of the promise. So he went home, and at age 19 announced to his right-wing conservative traditional family that he was going to marry a Japanese foreign exchange student. His father scoffed. "I used to kill those little buggers in Korea." Needless to say, the news was not well received. Nonetheless, they reluctantly gave him their blessing. They were married in 1980. They had a son, and lived a quiet life in Vancouver for 25 years. They were never quite the love-a-dove couple, because you've got to consider their origins and the circumstances under which they married each other. He began spending more time at work to avoid her, and she began spending more time with her friends to avoid him. Their son grew up, moved out, and began his own life. One day at the quarter-century mark, the bride sat down at the dinner table and confessed to her husband that she wanted to go home. Without missing a beat, he replied, "You want me to help you pack?" The rest is history. They untied the knot just as quickly as they had tied it, and as of this writing, they haven't heard from each other in 11 years. I had spent 4 months saving every cent I could possibly afford trying to save up for a ring. And if you know how unbelievably shit I'm with my money, this was no mean feat. But I loved her, and thought she was worth it. Only problem was, I had just finished paying it off the week of her birthday. Now, because I had been putting every dollar I could into that ring, I realized a few days before that I had failed to buy her a birthday present. So on her birthday she kept giving me the looks saying hello, do you have anything for me? This went on the whole day, with me feeling progressively worse throughout the day. She ended up blurting out, "You didn't buy me anything, did you?" and continued to go on one of her rants about how I have to be better with my money, etc. I ended up turning around while she was mid-sentence, walking into my bedroom, reaching into my secret hiding spot, grabbing the little box, storming back into the room and basically throwing it at her saying, "Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't afford to buy you a present. I had spent every faking cent I had on this. I had planned to take you somewhere on the weekend and propose." She starts crying. I start crying. She said yes, and we then had the best sex we'd ever had. 10 months later, she left me for her personal trainer, who dumped her slutty ass after 3 weeks. I told you, Courtenay, no one will ever put up with your shit like I do. I hope you rot in hell. We were together for nearly 10 years. The conversation of getting married happened many times, but there was always some reason on his end why it couldn't happen. Looking back, it was overly obvious that the idea just didn't excite him. Which is fine. Marriage isn't for everyone, but at least be honest that it's not what you want. We started having horrible fights and I even tried to break the relationship a couple of times. He always managed to talk me into coming back. Our families had no idea what was going on with us, so it really wasn't surprising when my mom let it slip one day that he had asked for our family ring. My heart just sank to my stomach. This was not going to end well, because after recent events I had no intention of saying yes. I didn't really know how to let him know I knew he had the ring. It was really nerve-wracking thinking about it. Eventually I just decided to break the ice with letting him know I knew he had a ring and let that lead into the I cannot say yes part of the conversation. He was livid. I ended up leaving the house because I honestly didn't know what to expect from him next. The next morning I came back home and he was pretending like nothing had happened. He told me I just needed more time to think on things because it was obvious I didn't know what I wanted. Nope. He left the house for the day and I took what little I needed and got the hell out of there. The last time I saw him in person was at a restaurant to get the ring back. He was very mad that I didn't show up by myself, but begrudgingly gave me the ring back. Every once in a blue moon he will contact me and act like we are best buddies still. It is weird. But yeah, that is my story. I have my grandmother's story, which ended well depending on how you look at it. My grandmother, my dad's side, and grandfather were high school sweethearts. They adored each other. They dated a while, all through high school I believe, or at least 3 years, and wanted to get married, but couldn't because my grandfather was going off to the military. They agreed to separate and move on. Only problem was my grandmother was pregnant, but didn't tell my grandfather. They moved on, he in the military and my grandmother dating, and ultimately marrying another man, who raised the child, my father, like his own. I was told he was an amazing stepfather who would did anything for her. Sadly, he passed away, and my grandmother after a few years began dating another man, marrying him as well. He also passed away. After all this time, my grandfather returned and met back up with my grandmother, rekindling their love for each other after all those years. They dated and got married. My grandfather being a retired police officer and such had a decent pension, as well as my grandmother's money after she retired, so they moved from my state of Ohio to Pennsylvania up into the deep mountains, and built their dream home from scratch, land and all, cutting down trees in the process. Only a few years into this star-crossed lovers escapade, my grandfather's heart valve went and needed surgery. I was probably 8 at the time, so my dad was obviously a grown man, well in his late 30s early 40s. After all the hassle, he got heart valve replacement surgery and the surgery went well, but ultimately passed away in the hospital. At his funeral my grandmother revealed to my father that the man he was looking at in the casket was actually his real dad and not her first husband. My grandmother and grandfather agreed to not tell my dad he was his father until one of them was to die, and to let him live a happy life not worrying about where his real dad was. If she passed, he'd tell him he was his dad. If he passed, she would, and in this case, it was the latter. I have never seen my dad cry that much in my life, and just writing this makes me tear up thinking about him and how he felt that day. Fast forward 15 years and my grandmother is still in the house they built up there in the mountains, literally barely keeping it and going bankrupt because she refuses to leave their home up there and move back. She has dated a couple guys, but has not married again, and I'm willing to bet never will again. My dad has had his share of health issues, but is still here, and I cherish this memory because it makes me appreciate the time I have with my father more than ever. A bit after my divorce, I began dating this professional chef who had recently moved to my area. I was not looking for serious, just something fun and distracting, which he was, for a second anyway. 3 weeks after our first date, he told me he loved me. I was flabbergasted. I could not say it back. A few weeks after that, he told me I had him thinking about marriage. He asked me, and I turned him down gently. We kept seeing each other, but I was weary of the speed he was wanting to move, because that sometimes is a signal for issues he may have. Fast forward a few weeks, and he gets an early birthday card from one of his friends from his home state asking if she could fly down and visit him. Because I'm not a possessive or jealous person, I saw no problem. He even wanted us to meet. I was at his place a little early on the night he went to pick this friend up at the airport. It was late, so I fell asleep. I woke up to the sound of a woman's voice calling my name and asking me to wake up. This woman walked into the bedroom where I was and announced, "Mississippi girlfriend and Virginia girlfriend need not ever meet. Please leave." I didn't fly all this way to sleep in the extra bedroom. I told her to get out. She did. While I packed, I asked the guy to come in and explain what was going on. He could not. I asked why he wanted me there when he brought her home. Still nothing. He just stared at his feet. As I was walking out, Virginia girlfriend, much older than me, by the way, stopped me and apologized for her rudeness. She said she should never have spoken to me like that. I asked her if she knew about me, and she said she did. She even told me that, on the way back from the airport, she begged him to tell me about her. When he would not, she asked that he take her back to the airport. I told her that I did not know about her, and that spoke volumes about her relationship with him. I then turned to him, tossed his key back to him, and walked out. This would have been perfection, except I had left my electric fryer at his place and had to go back to get it. When I buzzed the gate to get him to let me in a few days later, I announced myself as Mississippi girlfriend. He told me he was sorry. He hurt me more than anyone had ever. Laughing, I told him not to flatter himself. I left with my fryer and never saw or heard from him again. This is still the most amusing breakup ever. Bullet dodged. TLDR, Mississippi girlfriend met Virginia girlfriend. I was the one proposed to, and while I initially accepted, a week or so later I gave him the ring back and declined. We were together 5 or 6 years with a month split in between. When he asked, he caught me completely off guard. I was drunk, tired, and if I recall correctly, had just watched my Phillies lose their 10,000th game to the Cardinals. 10,000. I remember calling my family and friends to tell them, and they all sounded so down about it, which really made me think. I think having everyone so unexcited opened my eyes and made me wonder what they saw that I didn't. I started looking at my relationship more objectively and realized what a lazy bum my now fiancé was. Couldn't be bothered to clean anything if his life depended on it, let alone himself, and had no respect for the work I did around the house. Would throw trash on the floor, sit in front of the computer all day, and generally made zero effort to do anything that didn't involve staring at a screen all day. He had no ambition whatsoever and didn't seem to want anything more in life. He refused to drive, so I was his chauffeur. Refused to fly, so we never really left the city unless I was driving, and generally was a lump. So, essentially, I was taking on mothering an adult man. Was this the future I imagined for myself? Living in the same apartment, nothing changing, cleaning up after this person until I dropped dead. When I finally realized, I noped right the hell out as fast as I could. Fast forward almost 10 years later, he is still living in the same apartment, still single, still refuses to drive, and is seemingly embracing the neckbed life. Me. I ended up marrying a Cardinals fan, and have never been happier. I had known this girl since I was in junior high. We'll call her R. I had always wanted to date her, but she was too far up her own as to date a guy like me. Many years went by, and we hadn't seen each other or even talked. I heard she had gotten married and had a couple kids. Jump forward several years. Her sister, we'll call her B, comes into my work for an interview and gets the job. B and I talk a bit off and on, and she begins dating my roommate. They are hitting it off really well when B asks if I'd be interested in double dating with her, and I thought this was just a friends thing since I was married. So we go out on this double date and things go really well. Apparently I had just gotten a divorce and was looking to get back out in the dating world. She and I didn't have much in common, but she was a crush from long ago, so I figured what the hell, let's see how far this can go. We dated for about 3 months when I started staying with her every night. Sex was great. I pampered her like a princess and she returned that sentiment with being a lazy slob that never did anything, but I couldn't see that at the time. I cooked and cleaned for her, kept up with her kids and mine, all while she lounged around the house collecting social security and child support from her ex-husband. Christmas came around, and I showered her and her children with gifts. Made it the best Christmas ever according to her kids. Valentine's Day comes around. We had been talking about marriage for a while. I take her out to an extravagant meal. Then out on a late night walk downtown. We were walking along the canal in front of the place where we had our first date when I got down on one knee and asked her to marry me. She declined. She told me she wasn't ready yet and still needed time. Around March she had to move out of the house she was renting due to the original owners needing the house back and not wanting to resign the lease. I talked her into moving in with me as I owned my own house. I cleaned up my house and got everything ready for them to move in. Sold and got rid of a number of my things to make sure she and her kids had room for their things. Everything was going great for the first week or two of her living there. Then her kids started being very disrespectful to my things. I had been a bachelor for many years living only with my daughter and had accumulated many expensive pieces of electronics and a large collection of video games. The number of facts they gave about my things was 0. I tried to ask them to be careful and not break them as they were expensive, and she scolds me and tells me kids will be kids. This made me angry, but I just blow it off. The next weekend she wants to go out with her friends for a girls' night out and asks me to watch her 2 kids, her friends' 2 kids and my daughter, so they can go out. I told her sure. The night arrives, and her friend shows up with her 2 kids. Then another friend shows up with her 2 kids as well. So now I have 7 kids there at my house. She asks if I have any cash for the bar. I tell her no as I just got done paying all the bills. Then she freaks out on me for not giving her money because she had told her 2 friends that she would take care of it. All 3 of them are single moms with no jobs living off of alimony and child support. I suggested the kids could play in their rooms and they could stay there at the house and drink and hang out, but that didn't go over well either. They all 3 stormed out of the house. The kids run amok as 4 of the 7 were just absolute unpunished hellraisers. I finally get them to bed, and I sit down to play some video games. 2 AM rolls around, then 3, 4, 5 and they still haven't gotten back. I try to call thinking maybe something was wrong. The phone answers and all I can hear in the background is yelling and screaming, then the phone goes dead. I call back a few more times, but it goes straight to VM. I get pissed and finally just go to bed. I wake up at 10 AM to someone banging on the door. I answer it and find she had forgotten her keys. I let them in and try to find out about the previous night. Apparently they had been at the bar and guys were buying them drinks, then they asked them to come to an after party with them. They went to be nice since they were buying them drinks all night. It was at this time I knew it was a red flag number 1. The next weekend rolls around and she is going out yet again, not showing up till the next morning. This continues for several weeks. I begin getting distant and not caring anymore, but being the nice guy I am, have not kicked her out. The first week of May comes around. My birthday is that week and I asked if we could go do something. She says no, that she already made plans with her friends and figured I'd watch the kids for her. I flat out lost it. I told her how I really felt about everything she'd been doing lately and how I felt used. She at that point told me she thinks she's pregnant. We hadn't slept together since February and I knew she had had her period since then. I called her out on it and she swore it was mine. I told her I thought she had been cheating on me and she got majorly pissed. She then told me she wanted to break up and she knew we could never be together. She asked if she could stay with me for a bit while she got her stuff together. I told her for the sake of the kids that would be fine, but she would have to start paying rent. I allowed her to sleep on the couch for almost a month. I asked her weekly how she was coming along on getting her stuff out, and she always replied next week. Finally at the end of June I told her she needed to get her sheet and get. Each month she would call and ask if I was going to pay for her to have our baby. I told her to get a paternity test and prove to me it's mine. We had the paternity test done and surprise surprise, not mine. I have not talked to her since. We were high school sweethearts. I met him when I was 15 and he was 16 when I was 23, and after him suggesting that we should get married one day on more than one occasion, I finally asked him to marry me. It was really lame. We were in the car driving home from dinner or something, and I just flat out said, "Will you marry me?" He was unfazed and replied, "Sure." The rest of the ride home was us just talking to each other. So over the course of the next 8 months I found a friend that would marry us for free. I paid her with money I hid in a thank you card for her and made her a wallet anyways. We each bought her an expensive wedding band for each other, and I found a place on the beach where we could have a quick ceremony for free. Finally I invited our closest friends and family. My mom and dad, my brother and his wife, his dad and stepmom, his little brother, my best friend, and his best friend. All hell broke loose when his dad found out though. Turned into a shitstorm of him, his father, sending me nasty text messages, telling me I was a child, that I shouldn't be rushing into getting married so young. Mind you, we've been together for over 9 years at this point. Told me I was forcing my boyfriend to marry me, that I guilt tripped him into it, and a vast slew of other terrible things that brought me to tears. So, I confronted my so about all this, and he was upset about all the things his dad said too. So, I called it off. I cancelled everything, called everyone and told them that we were going to reschedule it to another date. It was really hard holding back the tears. I did this while he was still at work, and I was sitting in my studio crying over a glass of wine. When he got home I was still in the same spot. He came up to me and said something to the effect of, "Hey, I love you, fuck him. We are still getting married." He doesn't get a say in this. We ended up calling everyone back, except his father, and having the little ceremony on the original date. We've been married for just about 3 years now. So, I guess no one ever said no. I just cancelled the whole thing and told his dad that I wouldn't marry his son. He can go fuck himself by the way. TLDR. So and I planned a cheap wedding after 9 years together. His dad flips out on us. So is upset and says he doesn't know what to do. I call off the wedding. So says fuck him. We get married anyways. Been married 3 years. My mom actually proposed to my dad not once, not twice, but 3 times. All 3 times my dad rejected her because they had not lived together long enough in his opinion, dating for 3 years, living together for 2, and because he felt he wasn't ready for marriage. After attempt number 3, my mother vowed she was absolutely going to wait until my father had proposed 3 times until she accepted. My mother is extremely stubborn. I have never experienced her either budging an inch or compromising once she has her mind set on something. In the 25 years I have been alive, what I do know is that once my father proposed, her reply was, "Yeah, whatever, I'll marry you. Just get on your damn feet. You can't kneel here." Now for context, at the time he proposed, they had now been living together for around 4.5 years. He felt ready for a marriage. He had also recently broken both his feet in an accident and was jumping around on crutches. Now my dad, being the blithering moron he is, had decided the romantic setting for a proposal the recipient had publicly stated would be rejected was going to be one of his rehabilitation walks. It was rainy, it was dark, it was cold, and he managed to kneel in a pretty big puddle. How he even managed to kneel with 2 broken feet is beyond me. He proposed, and my mom replied in the fashion previously stated. The end. This will be buried, but here it goes anyway. Don't judge me for this. I've actually been proposed to a total of 4 times. Said no to 3 of them. First, we were just entirely too young. We were high school sweethearts and into our first year of college. Just too young is all I can say. Second, he was a total loser, but I loved him. Tried very hard to help him change, but he kept getting worse and worse into drugs and just plain failure. Started out well, and I kept thinking he would go back to that. Him proposing was kinda my wake up call that, if I said yes, this would be my life. Third, I straight up just couldn't see myself grow old with this person. Plus we had only been dating a few months and he proposed getting straight off the airplane from visiting his family in front of everyone. And yes, I said no right then and there. Fourth, I said yes. We are getting married in March and our relationship isn't perfect, but I'm perfectly happy with it. Oh yay. I love telling this story. Here's my heartbreak story. Met a girl at a Halloween party I threw. Didn't know her, but my friends locked us in a room and said get to know each other. I was half drunk, but I tried to be friendly and chatted her up. Long story short, we started dating. and we loved each other. I made it a point to always tell her how beautiful she was and to always make her laugh at least once every day because it's part of who I am. I appreciate what I have and I don't take it for granted. I was happy 4 years and not one fight or argument. Some disagreements, but nothing like what my previous girlfriends had put me through. I know what a fight is. 3 years dating, I have to move because I'm military, and that shit happens, and she decides to tag along, which I'm perfectly fine with. We didn't live together, yet because our living arrangements were fine the way they were, she went to college, and lived at home with her dad. I lived on base with a roommate. It was just easier to wait till I get posted than to shuffle everyone's furniture around for nothing. Anyway, we move in together in the new place and find out little habits we didn't know about each other, but it's all groovy, and I start to consider proposing, since she wanted to be married before having kids. She dropped a few hints that I should propose when I was saving money for a ring. I finally have the money and try to think of the perfect time to do it. Christmas is cliché, but it'll do just fine. Because I had spent money on a ring, I couldn't afford to go spend Christmas with her family, so she flew, and I spent with my fam. I had a military flight to take me there, free of charge, so it wasn't all bad, but the plan would have been Christmas together at her fam and New Year's at mine's. She was supposed to get back on the 27th, but due to a huge blizzard her flight gets delayed, and she's stuck at her layover airport, and isn't home till 6 AM on the 28th. I got the call at 3 AM anyway. Yeah, she gets home late and tired. My plan was to propose when I go pick her up at the airport, but because of the circumstances, figured fuck it, let her sleep and just propose tomorrow, later today. Well, as we're laying in bed she's playing on her new iPad. The light from it prevented me from sleeping, so I popped open an eyeball and saw what she was looking at. Houses in her hometown. If you've ever been drunk you know that feeling when you're laying perfectly flat, but you feel like you're falling. In the 5 seconds between me realizing what I saw and speaking up, I feel like I feel through the earth itself. I felt tears well up in my eyes. I felt afraid. I felt angry. I was confused. What the fuck is going on? I think to myself, hey, why? Our eyes meet. She says nothing but says everything. No, incredulous. You're faking joking, right? I was broken up with on the day I was going to propose. She was homesick. Too homesick to be happy spending the rest of her life with me. I didn't sleep that day, or the next. I told her about my plans. I showed her the ring. I faking sobbed. I wept. I felt a huge part of me dying. If you've never felt heartbreak, I envy you. I don't agree with it's better to have love and lost than to never have loved at all. No. I would much rather have never faking known her. I would rather she murdered me. I would rather she cheated on me. I would rather she died in a car crash than the way it went down. I'm a different person now than I was before. It's been 5 years, and I'm still single and not looking. Something broke in my brain that day. That hurt. Fuck that hurt. Fuck that hurt. It took me quite a while, maybe even 2 weeks, before I could even muster the courage to tell anyone what happened. I couldn't fall asleep without crying. Forget about even talking about it, fuck man. I don't even like thinking about how much crying I did in the span of that first month. The worst was going back to work and realizing I can't hide the truth forever. She was ready to change her Facebook status, and I was still trying to pretend like nothing was going on. We had a small workplace of people who all got along, maybe 20 people who all know each other. One person then knew my neighbor / coworker, and I asked him if he could break the news so I didn't have to cry at work. He did, thank fuck. A few people pulled me aside and asked if there was anything they could do and gave me their support as it was evident she was not alright with me, even though I tried to hide it. Weeks go by, and I'm finding coping mechanisms, which get completely faked up by the fact she's still living with me, because moving 1700 kms in winter's not feasible. She lived with me till March when spring started, and offered to share the bed. My bed. Go fuck yourself. I'm sleeping on the couch, 4 years and she wouldn't even fuck me anymore. Why the fuck would I want? Ugh. I'm still so faking mad about that shit still. Anyway, I remain civil and let her move out with her friends and Hugh family helping her, while I sit on the couch. She hits the road the next day and assumes she's spending the night in my bed. No. This is my bed. I changed the bedding, got new pillows and everything. You don't live here no more. Go find somewhere else to live. I've spoken to her maybe 3 times since. Once was to give her a box of stuff the movers wouldn't take. I was visiting friends in her town anyway, so I obliged. It was awkward and I definitely regretted doing that favor. Another time was to ask if she had an email from our landlords where she claimed responsibility for the damages done to the carpet, and they said it was fine. They charged me $500 damage deposit for the damages. She didn't pay me back. Last time was because my Netflix account notified her my credit card was declined. Card expired and it was linked to her email. I avoided talking to her so much I got a new Netflix and just paid it in double for 4 years. I told her to cancel it, which she did, but then she asked, so how have you been, what's new? I replied nothing. I have nothing to say to her. My life isn't what I want it to be because of her. I'm faked up. I'm doing okay, but I know I'm faked up, and I'm scared of women and I don't know what I want. I want and I don't want to be dating. I think it'll get me over it, but I think if it does get me over it, and I get heartbroken again, I'll just kill myself. I'm not suicidal, but if I go through that again, looking back it's so much less painful. But if I don't try I'll regret never having kids. I'm already hating myself for not having kids. I'm normal 99.99% of the time, and then I think of women and I faking. Can't get myself to just do it. Just Tinder up. Just eHarmony up. Just chat up the cute cashier you like. I'm faked up. I'm doing perfectly fine, but I'm faked up. Quick edit. In retrospect, it's good that it ended when it did. We wanted different things. If she'd said yes, and then we had kids, and then she realized she was homesick, and ruined my family and me never seeing my kids, because I'm military she'd get custody, that would have been extra hard, but it doesn't make it any easier to accept. It was a grieving process for me. It sucked, and lots of self-hatred, even though it wasn't because of anything I did. I blamed her family for talking her into leaving me, which they apparently didn't. I blamed myself for being shitty, which I wasn't. It's just very hard to accept, even though it's for the best in the long run. Edit. Thought about how much crying I did. Cried at work. Strange proposal story. I worked as a exotic dancer. Yes, I know, crazy. I never would date men I met at the club, but I tried dating men I met at other bars. So I met this man Mason, decided to go on a couple dates. Within a week's time he broke into my house, stole my car keys at the bar, so I would need a ride from him. Woke up in the morning to them on top of my purse. I decided to end any conversation with him. Later that night at the club he comes in, buys me off the floor for an hour's VIP, gets a free bottle of champagne. My boss tells me I can't deny the dance and I have to go into the room for at least 30 minutes. So I reluctantly go into the room, grab the bottle, and start chugging it, as he tells me the last 5 days have been the best days of his life, and asks me to marry him. I flip out knowing that he was the one who broke into my house, and taking my car keys. He denied it at first, then came clean about it. Still begs me to marry him in the VIP room, until my 30 minutes were up, and I walked out. My boss tells me his real name is Jason, not Mason. This man then continued to call my phone with no answer, started to block his number. One of my other dancers answers, and he said he was a customer from earlier that I gave my number to, and I, knowing that I don't do that, told him I was calling the cops. I ended up needing a restraining order from him. He would send me flowers and gifts. I ended up having to sell my house and move to a different town, stop dancing, and got a 8-to-5 job because of him. After that I didn't date anyone for years. Now I'm happily married to a man I met at a friend's house. We are celebrating our first anniversary this Wednesday. I haven't been refused. I have refused. My boyfriend and I, we met little over 3 years ago. He was my best friend, and as my relationship then started to crumble, first year in university and all, high school sweetheart, he was there to get me through it all. We know everything about each other. We like the same music, have the same sense of humor. We play chess on Tuesday afternoons in the local cafe. After a devastating amount of thinking and reconsidering, I broke up with my boyfriend and celebrated my newly found freedom with the close friends I had made. I also got a cat. Her name is Monty, and she is a total ass. But I digress. My landlord at the time was being a piece of shit. I was not allowed access to hot water. He tried to poison my cat. He gave permission for me to keep it though, and was passive aggressive on the whole. Me and my best friend decide to look for an apartment together. Surely we could find something together as friends. But then we had a party and we ended up sleeping together. Right before moving in together. We spent an entire weekend eating snacks and watching anime and getting naked, so it was a happy weekend. But then the housing question came up. We decided to just go for it. Fresh into our newly established fuck buddyship/relationship thing, we moved into our own apartment with cat, but with separate bedrooms in case something went wrong between us. So far, that bedroom has been used once. Before an important exam. It sucked. So he has claimed in our 2 years together that he knows what he wants. I'm tempted to say so too, but I'm 21 years old. He is 30 now, which you honestly wouldn't be able to tell. Not that it matters, so I understand he would want to. We are happy, we communicate, we get through tough times like champs. We are everyone's OTP for some reason. But I'm 21, still foolishly in love, and not even halfway into my studies. I feel the need to become my own person first and get a career going before I give in. Therefore, I've said no about 8 times now. Besides, I'd look awfully out of place in a wedding dress. After my telling my dodgy proposal, I thought I would tell the story of my actual one. My husband was really nervous about proposing. We had talked about it. He knew I was going to say yes, but still thought I could change my mind any moment. I knew it was going to happen soonish. I guess there are people that would say that isn't romantic, but it sweeted us. He would practice proposals on me to a point that it was almost like a joke. He'd say some new speech each time, present the ring box, open it and a bead, or battery. One time it was a freaking Q-tip. We always thought it was great fun. One late night on April's Fool Day he pulls this same stunt. I'm doing my typical yup ooh-ah-ha response. Of course he opens the box and the freaking ring is in there. I was so overcome with happiness and saying yes that it didn't occur to me at first that it was April 1st. Once it clicked I kinda gave him that sideway what ka talking about Willis look. He had a good laugh about it and said look at the clock. It was technically April 2nd when he asked. I love the man, but that was sneaky on his part. Alright, story time. Gonna be long, I've been itching to type this out somewhere, and since you asked, here it is. My ex and I had been dating for around 7 years before I decided to pop the question. Nothing romantic, just a rooftop thing timed to the sunset. I got down in one knee and asked. The response was less than stellar, more on the line of UHH, can I think about this? Oh, shit, red flag, but maybe she's not ready. So, stupid me being so in love at this point, decided to wait it out. We had a lengthy talk about our future, and we decided that we should take it a bit slower leading up to it. Here's where it gets messy. About a month later, I get blindsided with a break, and she tells me that she needs time alone to think and to be herself and experience life. I thought, what the fuck, what happened to finding a nice place together, adopting a pup, and kids' names? So here I am, devastated at the thought of losing everything. About a month goes by, and I finally crack, so I messaged her. Conversation flows well, we both miss each other, and we decide to go meet up for dinner. Everything goes well, laughter and joy all around. She invites me back to her place to hang out and continue our night. So we started talking, and I asked what she was up to for the bit of time that we were apart. She said she's just been missing me and hang out with some new friends. I inquire a bit more about it and turns out she's just been hanging out with some dude that she met prior to our break. I navigate through her words and feints, then finally asked what was going on. Turns out she's been using him as a factoid and experiencing life apparently. So, you're telling me that you really wanted to just be technical about this relationship and wanted a bit of that greener grass before settling? Okay, it gets worse. Here I am, hopelessly in love. I try everything I can to win her back. Spending the following months doing sweet nothings, being romantic, setting up surprises. She loves every bit of it, and she's eating it all up. All the while, she's faking this dude and telling me that she can't wait to spend the rest of her life with me because she loves me. This goes on for, I'm going to recall 3 months. I finally couldn't take it, and I backed off a bit. I stopped doing shit for her, and I focused on rebuilding. She then notices that she might be losing me and starts being super nice to me now. Cooking meals for me, getting small gifts, hanging out only with me, and trying to reassure that fuckboy there isn't important. Unfortunately, I buy into it. It gets worse from here. So now we are T+5 months since the break happened, and I'm starting to regain some independence and confidence. I started dating again and doing things away from her. She starts to notice and then starts flipping out on me. First it was the guilt trip, then it was the emotional things like crying and self-pity. I tell her that if there's no real commitment then I'm moving on. We start to talk a bit more seriously about our future again, and I start to buy into it again. I give it another go, but all the while, I told her that until she commits, I'm going to continue meeting people and going on dates. She takes it badly, and we don't see each other for a bit. To be honest, to this point, I'm in such emotional shambles that anything I did was just a distraction from the awful feelings I harbored. So here we are, probably 7 months out now. I lost a lot of trust with her and also some friends. She had a tendency to cling to my friends and use them as her own fallback cushion, getting emotional support every way she could. I started to call some friends out on it and told them that it wasn't cool. It made me paranoid and I didn't like it. And then I get this for a response: dude, you think something's going on with her and me? You got it all wrong. She was actually sleeping with so and so. Well, safe to say that I've basically hit the lowest point. I was a reek and I was done. I worked up the courage to call my ex and give her a piece of my mind. She then breaks down and says that she didn't mean any of it and she still loves me and wants to spend her life with me. Oh, not this again. So I moved on from there. I started seriously dating this new girl now and everything goes well. Until ex finds out, then straight out starts harassing me pretty much every day from there on for around a year. It was her way of telling me that she's fighting for me and for us. That there's still hope and she wants that life with me again. Sending me gifts, letters, texts, and etc. This was straight up crazy. So, maybe T plus 1.5 years, everything settles. I stop getting anything, and I'm able to recover from all of this. But sad to say, I'm still a bit ruined at this point. She played her emotional games and no one came out the winner. So in case she reads this and pieces everything together and knows that this is her, I tell you, thanks for taking away nearly 2 years of my life and making every day miserable. Your selfish actions caused a whole lot of hurt for a lot of people. I hope you spend the rest of your life thinking about how good it could have been and that you'll never quite get that happiness that you were hoping to get. Sorry for the long rant, but it was just something I was holding on to for too long. To pull everyone's spirits up after this. Got into the best shape of my life, met a hottie, she said yes, and got a solid career now. TLDR, longtime girlfriend goes on a break with me and bangs her friend, then plays games with me, bangs a friend of mine, and harass me for around a year after it. This is extremely long, but cathartic. Old throwaway account for this, even though it will probably be buried. I wasn't denied a proposal, I was tipped off that my ex likely posted about me here, so I'm going to write about the impending proposal as the wake-up call I needed to escape. Backstory: my first adult relationship, I was 18, he was 40, was with a minor celebrity who was very abusive. His violence put me in the hospital thrice, and he convinced me it was my fault every time but the last, which is why I enrolled at a university 500 miles away in secret and fled. This likely accounts for how I missed a lot of warning signs in my subsequent relationship despite tons of therapy over the 3 years between. I met my boyfriend on OkCupid during my senior year of college. He was a few years older than me, but had established himself in a government job with a high security clearance and secret tasks in foreign countries, like James Bond. A classmate and close friend of mine once told him he hoped a displaced civilian would light him on fire. He doted on me with grand romantic gestures. The only problem was a crazy ex who was always calling/texting, but we both had crazy exes, right? I graduate. We plan to move to a large metropolitan city 3 hours away where I have gotten an excellent job that starts in fall. He lives in a quaint town that is pretty, but doesn't have much going on outside of tourism. He delays moving by a month, then 2, and then confesses that he's made a down payment on a house in this town because he sees her here. Smitten, I give up my excellent job and start looking for work, but jobs are scarce. Things get weird. He starts waking me up in the middle of the night because he is convinced that foreign governments have sent assassins. He, 6 feet 3 inches, 300 pounds, hides in a closet while he sends me, 5 feet 2 inches, 110 pounds, around his huge house terrified and carrying a gun that I don't know how to use because they won't do anything to you. They don't want you. After months of struggling to find work, I want to apply for unemployment, but I'm not allowed to because it would taint his political aspirations. Also, despite earning 6 figures, he wants me to pay half of the monthly house payments. I offered to pay rent from the start, but I could have rented a luxury apartment for the amount he wanted. He knows I have savings from my uni job and demands I give him half, 30% of rent for the year, and do all housework/cooking. Meanwhile, he's bought a brand new BMW, but he starts demanding that I drive him 45 minutes to work because his ankle is sore for the duration of our 2.5-year relationship, but he drives when I'm not around. He constantly criticizes my car/how I drive and never chips in for gas. I get a job at a high-end boutique, but now I have to pay for all of the groceries since my savings/housework/cooking/chauffeuring aren't enough. Around this time he asks me to get his mom's phone number off his phone and the call log reveals many hours-long conversations with his ex. She's not well, he tells me. She's suicidal. How can I be so heartless? He has his colleagues over, and they laugh when I say something about the secrecy of his job. One tells me he has the lowest security clearance possible. He's an it guy. Still good, not James Bond. Whenever he makes me search the house at night, I have a snack and watch Netflix, so he has to hide longer. Then I manage to get an interview for a job in town in my field, but my boyfriend is skeptical. Who is going to drive him to work? Who is going to clean the house? My manager at the retail job loans me a beautiful silk dress for my interview. I look fantastic. Even though it's not a day where he usually goes to the office, he asks me to drive him. He is drinking a liter of Mountain Dew at 8 AM, and when he gets out of the car, he accidentally spills most of it on me. I try to clean up, but my hair is wet and my dress has a huge green stain. I call the interviewer and nobody answers, so I show up late, explain that there's been an accident, while trying to be professional and not cry, and ask if I could please reschedule. They say they'll call me. They don't. I tell the manager at my retail job a crazy person threw a drink at me. I pay $400 because the dress isn't returnable. I'm too ashamed to tell anyone. I'm supposed to be atoning for how dysfunctional I was as a teen by shacking up with my abusive musician boyfriend instead of going to college. It takes 3 months to decide to drive back to my hometown while he's on a business trip. 2 weeks later I get an offer for a job related to my desired field. Back in the tourist town. Because I didn't want my parents to see me as a fuck up, I told them the breakup was because I couldn't find a job. The next day my boyfriend's in my parents' kitchen, 6-hour drive, telling my sympathetic mom how much he loves me. He says he's in therapy and swears he'll never take me for granted again, and because of the job, I go back. He pulls out all the stops and things are good for a few months, but I make friends at work, and he feels threatened, and tries to keep me away from them. I'm killing it at my job. He says my boss asks me to lead PDs because she wants to get what she can out of me before she fires me. He starts hiding my keys, so I'm late for work. He removes my car's mirrors. The better things are going for me, the nastier he is. One day I'm putting away laundry and I find the gold engagement ring in his sock drawer. I'm allergic to gold. I get a rash. He's seen it. We go out to dinner with his colleague and colleague's fiance the next day. I compliment the fiance's gold earrings and mention I'm allergic. Boyfriend barks no you aren't. I reiterate that I am, and he pounds the table with his fist, then carries on genially, oblivious to everyone's horrified silence. On the drive home, he says our wedding will be different from his colleagues. I tell him I don't want to marry him. He says yes you do and prattles on. The thought of spending my life like this chills me to my core. I apply for grad school in a city where I've always wanted to live on the other coast. Thanksgiving is that week, and I'm spending it with family. I told him weeks prior that he can't come and to make other plans. He doesn't. He calls all day, getting progressively drunker and crying about suicide. The last messages were wordless drunken wailing. I call 911. He gets a 5150. After I move all of my stuff into my new place, I pick him up. He starts screaming about how I faked up and I owe him apologies. He's not getting the reaction he wants. I'm all out of facts and turn up the radio. He yanks my parking brake up in the middle of a busy highway and flees. He leaves sputtering voicemails when I don't deign to drive him home. A few days later, I get a call from his mom because he attempted suicide. His mom is nice, but neurotic and aware her son is an asshole. When I first met her, she patted my hand and said sweetie, you don't have to settle. She's almost 80, he's adopted, and I help her clean up the blood all over his bedroom/bathroom. He tried to slit his wrist in a way that would garner attention, but not kill him. Google search was open on his computer, nicked a major artery, passed out, and broke his arm by falling on it, yet somehow called 911. His mom takes care of some stuff in town. She flew over without packing. He's giving me the whole wheel to counseling. You're my everything. His phone is buzzing inside his bag and it's annoying, so I pick it up, and it's his ex with 40 missed calls and text previews that say things like, can I come back? And checkout is a 2 I need to know. I close out of the texts to see a very active OkCupid inbox. I head for the door. He gets out of bed to call me a cruel, useless hoe and faciplance, pantsless, which is how I leave him. Over the next 2 weeks, he started showing up at wherever I was out to glare at me from across the room. He was a coward. I was surrounded by friends, sometimes with a really sad-eyed woman. He was still calling/texting me obsessively. I had a track phone and couldn't block him, oscillating between begging me to come back/saying was going to die alone because of me. 2 weeks post breakup, after a night of being bombarded with messages of the dying alone variety, there was a text that said something like I'm happier than you'll ever be. I disregarded it until a colleague who knew he was nuts called to ask how I was coping. He had gotten engaged to the ex/the sad-eyed woman that morning. He had been seeing his crazy ex, who lived 3 hours away, the whole time we had been together, framing me as unstable and unable to cope with life. If he ever left me, she would drive to him and back in a single day, 6 hours of driving, and quit her job to go to him immediately after the 5150. She had been the one to call 911 after his accident, after which he told her to wait in town for him, which makes her the way less crazy person in their relationship. Their engagement lasted maybe 2 months and I feel badly for her. My laptop went on the fritz about a month after the breakup. The techs found a bunch of surveillance software on it, which explains the stalking. My ex was fired not long after for doing this kind of shady shit/being unstable. I believe he's living on disability and renting out every room in his house. It's been 6 years, and 3 weeks ago, I married a wonderful man who shares my goals and makes feel so loved. Remember the guy way at the beginning who told my ex that he should be lit on fire? You probably don't, because this is so long, but he's my husband now. We've known each other for 12 years, but started dating during my 2nd year of grad school. We are unbelievably happy. TLDR, my ex posted a sob story here. I posted the other side of that sob story. Suck it, ex. In April of 2015, I asked my girlfriend of 3 years to marry me. She said yes. I was ecstatic. We celebrated and changed our statuses and decided we would tell our families that night. My family was exuberant. She went and called her mom while I was getting ready for bed, and they talked. For almost 3 hours they talked. She came to bed and we went to sleep. I was so fucking happy. She woke up the next morning while I made us breakfast and handed me the ring back and said, "I think we need to wait." My heart broke instantly. She said she needed to figure things out. She ended up getting a job back in Texas, and within a month we were broken up and she was dating other guys. I truly believe her mom talked her out of marrying me because her mom and dad have a shitty marriage and she thinks that is what's going to happen to her daughter. Which is funny because like 3 months before her mom had told me that she could see her daughter was happy and taken care of. I'm still single. I just sleep around now. I don't really believe in love anymore, and when I hear women tell me they're close with their moms, I drop them like a bad habit. We had been dating for nearly 5 years when she got a year exchange for a university in Scotland. I was going to fly over and see her halfway through, and we were going to travel around Europe for 3 weeks. To be super romantic, I planned to propose in Rome, bought a ring, etc. We were talking one night on the phone and had a fight. She had viewed her time away as a break and had been dating people. I was more than surprised. Told her about the ring and she said no to the whole idea. It was pretty terrible. Still went to Europe and traveled around with her as it was only a couple weeks out. It was super awkward and I had the worst case of blue balls one can imagine the whole time. Managed to return the ring before I left. I can honestly say that it was the most brutally embarrassing thing I have ever done. The icing on the cake was when the sales girl asked, "Why are you returning the ring?" and having to answer her. Let me tell you about the time I proposed without knowing it. My ex and I were almost at the 2-year mark of dating. We were both 19 and dumb. She was in love, I was just in the moment still. Every other week we would always go out to eat and shop/people watch. This one particular date night she asks me what I'm getting her for our 2nd anniversary. I said, "Oh, I don't know, let's check out what they have at the mall jewelry shop." After looking for a few minutes she has her eyes set on a $400 necklace. For 19-year-old me, that was a lot of money. So I try to make her happy with something more in my price range. That's when I see the $180 diamond ring. Her birthstone is diamond and it's less than half. She lines, "Love it," I thought. When I pointed it out she got really giddy, said, "OMG, I love it," and the jeweler had a small happy smile on her face. Got the X sized up and we picked the ring up 2 days before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is held at my dad's house. My dad's family, my stepmom's family, all told a little over 40 people. I bring the girlfriend with me, swearing her ring. It still hadn't registered what I had bought her, so in we go. I get comfortable on the couch watching the Thanksgiving Lions game. She's talking to one of my cousins, playing with it on her finger. Every now and then I'd hear someone say congratulations. I thought they were telling my cousin that because he and his new live-out wife were expecting, so still no big deal. Then my stepmom calls me over. She said it was rude of me not to tell her or my father that I was engaged before telling others. What? You and girlfriend are getting married? Why didn't you tell us first? What the hell are you talking about? You bought girlfriend an engagement ring. No, that's a 2-year anniversary gift. Welsh's telling everyone it's an engagement ring. AWW fuck. So stupid. 19-year-old me calls girlfriend over to the other room. I tell her I need the ring back. Why? Because we are not getting married. We aren't? Not anytime soon. That's when she took the ring off, threw it at me, screamed that I'm a faking asshole, and ran out the door. My whole family heard it, all of it. I took off after her. She told me to leave her alone. I tried to explain what I did. She called me a faking idiot. I lost it. I said I never asked the faking question. We never even brought up marriage in conversation before. I was just trying to save some money. She didn't like hearing that. We were screaming outside for a bit. My brother came to try and calm us down, but it was beyond the point of no return. We were over. I went back inside once my girlfriend's sister came and picked her up. It was really awkward. Everyone kept glancing at me and avoiding me. My dad came over with my uncle. They had a bottle of wild turkey and some solo cups. After a few shots and more family joining in the drinking, I told them how this came about. Everyone started laughing. I didn't try to fix things with her after that. Like I said, we both said some things that neither one of us should have said. I was proposed to at around age 16 over 17. I met a guy online when it was totally safe to do so and chatted to him for around 3 to 6 months. It wasn't a relationship by any means. Well, I didn't think so. I don't remember how old he was, but at a guess at least 25. I don't remember telling him what town I lived in, but I must have mentioned it. He called me on my work phone. At the time I worked at a supermarket and asked if I wanted anything for lunch. I laughed it off because he lived 3 hours away. 3 hours later this guy, who believe me looked nothing, and I mean nothing like his one picture he sent me, was standing in front of me with a bunch of roses. I thought he had mistaken me. Stupidly enough I took a break from work and we went for a drive. After stopping the car and shooting up with morphine next to me, holy shit I was so young I didn't even know what any of that meant. He handed me a key and said he'd rented a house for us to live in, and then handed me a bank card linked to his account for me to use. Last but not least he handed me a ring engraved with something like "Our love will never die" or something. I freaked out and said I'd need to think about it as I was scared for my life. I didn't really think much of it, but got him to drop me home. He then knew where I lived, dummy. I ended up messaging him and suggesting we should just be friends and I wasn't ready. He then proceeded to put a hex, yes you read right, a hex, on me. He wanted me to be miserable for all eternity. He then started flying. He had his pilot's license over my house. He'd send me messages like, "Oh your mum is home from work today," or "Your dog is off the chain," or shit like that. It greatly reduced, and probably a year later he messaged me to let me know he'd removed the hex. Don't meet people online when you're young and naive. Edit. TLDR. I met a guy online. He proposed whilst shooting up with morphine. I said no. He put a hex on me. He fly over my house and stalked me for a while. He then took the hex off. Edit 2. I'm now 29 years old. For a term of reference, how long ago this was. I'm also happily married.